This is a meeting of the ad hoc grant committee initiated by the Board of Finance on June 4th, 2025 at 7 p.m. I want to go around the table and have each person who's here introduce themselves and explain why they're, in 2 sentences, why you're at the table. I'm Sharon Huxley. I'm the chair of the Board of Finance.
And the reason why you're here?
What?
The 2 sentences of why you're here? Just because you're the Board of Finance?
That was. I gave you one.
Amy Rushlow, I am here to help support this town and whatever we need to do to secure more funds.
Eric Region, I chair the solid waste committee and we have put together the first grant for you to evaluate.
Okay.
Elizabeth Powell, I have some experience with grants from my prior job. And so I'm interested in helping the town in any way I can get more funding and use what they have most efficiently.
Thank you.
Steve Winter, I am a longtime resident of town. I am currently the chairman of the Economic Development Commission with Sharon and Amy on my board. And very much interested in finding out how we can get some funding for some projects here in town. Again, to continue with improvement in that avenue.
Cynthia Maikiola, I'm a biologist, but besides my biological interest in composting, Eric told the Solid Waste and Recycling Committee about this grant opportunity and a webinar that was coming up for it. And I took the lead to go to the meeting, find out about the grant, learn more. I put a grant together, I wrote it, and I have some figures that we can talk about. And I went with all the information that I have, but I think there's some room for discussion for sure. I never felt alone because as soon as I had questions that I was working through, Eric was able to pick things up, but not all of the Solid Waste and Recycling Committee is even aware at all. We haven't had a chance to meet. It's been really just Eric and I pushing this forward, and we hope that this is an opportunity for us to get some grant funding, and happy to help with any questions. And really looking forward to feedback. Thank you.
Okay, Katie, want to introduce yourself to the group?
Yes, why I'm here, oh gosh, okay, Katie Erickson, on the Board of Finance, a member. I am here to learn because I don't know too much about the grant process. And I am hoping that we could set up a grant committee that is, sort of self-functioning so that it will have more process to feed funding into the town. That's really it. And so I'm here not because I have a particular great idea about some grants that would be helpful to the town, but I really want to establish a robust committee. So I'm here to support that.
Okay, thank you. Jen?
Jen Capasso, I work here for the town. I'm the executive assistant and HR administrator. And I currently oversee all the administration that goes along with all the grants. So I am here as help and obviously the worker and all the things that go along with it. So.
And I'm Leslie Butchiglupi, I'm the finance director. Ultimately, all grants have a financial component, and that's where I come into play to make sure that our T's are crossed, our I's are dotted, and the town follows all the regs to the grants to make sure that we actually receive the funding and they don't claw it back.
Okay, so as I started, the purpose of this committee is primarily to figure out what we think a standing committee ought to be, and to figure out what essentially what their mission is, what tasks they should be doing, and then we would make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen on, requesting that they appoint a committee, and at that time we could recommend people if we wanted to, or not. We could let them show leadership and initiative, and finally appoint a grant committee. That was mildly snarky because we've been asking for over 2 years to have a grant committee, so
So how did you form? Is it
We-
self-appointed?
actually.
I got voluntold to be here.
you get-
I saw the information
That is-
on for the
Okay.
town requesting if anybody was interested. I saw the call to action.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, because nobody was responding when we asked at town meetings and when it was in the bulletin. So people who had expressed an interest or had been involved in grants were people who were invited to participate,
Just coalesced.
just like, please help us get started. And so people did agree. Do we have anybody online?
Just Joe.
Hi, Joe. Welcome to our meeting.
And popcorn.
Yeah.
Joe's barefoot by the pool.
Okay. In addition to that part of the process, that part of our job, we have to, because the Board of Finance is going to meet next week and needs some guidance. We're also going to review the Solid Waste Committee's grant that's in progress that needs finance sign off to be sent to the Board of Selectmen. Now, beyond that, one of the first things here is the existing process and challenges. And if Cynthia, I know you're here primarily about the solid waste grant, but if you will bear with us, I think you might find it interesting / instructive to be with us while Jen reviews what's currently going on,
So,
which is, by the way, not terribly organized. Excuse me, she is incredibly
Listen.
organized. She is incredibly organized, but the process so far for getting grants has not had guidelines other than rules.
so what I did was, just so you know, the sheets that you have in front of me are kind of like what we should be doing. But I'll kind of go over what is happening. So the first page is, just some of the common grants that we do, we either apply for them almost yearly. Sometimes they're, every other year, sometimes they're, we have a couple of them that are a couple times a year. But the ones listed there are our typical. And the thing to note before I go on is that a lot of these will pop up, like our steep, we know about a few months in advance. But a lot of them, like the CPF grant, they'll call and they'll say, hey, we've got some funds, you have a week. And this is what we're doing with it. And so it's really imperative, just priority one is to make sure we have some shovel-ready projects. Looking at what we're looking for capital expenditures in multiple years going down the road, to make sure we do have projects to pick from, and whether or not that has something to do with this committee is up for chat. But project readiness, so it always pops with that one. So the first thing is we always look at is like, is this project something that we can do now? Is it something we have to wait? Is it a road work that now it's almost November and we're probably not gonna be able to do it until the spring? Those types of factors. So you have to look at whatever's being proposed and whether or not it's actually shovel ready, or if it's something that's gonna have to wait. Is there any other type of legal documentation? Is there any type of bidding or contracts that have to be submitted? And then there's always the affirmative action compliance that goes in depending on how big the grant is. There's a lot of components there with Charo, with David's Bacon, and there's some other thing, and other prevailing wages and things of that nature that you have to get ahead of time. So those types of things you have to look at, and then how are we recording those? How are we doing it? Right now, what happens is, something will pop up and, we'll make sure that if we need to go out for bid, we'll go out for bid. A lot of times we make sure that we go on the state website, because it cuts out a lot of the bidding process, because we already know that they're vetted. And so we'll use somebody that's on the state website. Most of our grants are not that large, so we don't end up hitting into the federal level, where once you hit that $1 million mark, there's a lot more for the affirmative action. But even steep has churro requirements and other things like that we need to comply to. And they kind of trickle down, right? Like, so we kind of get them all together when we can get them, but there's no, here's first step. You need to make sure you get all this paperwork ready, and then we move on. So then the next kind is again, are we eligible? So if you start going through that checklist, once you have these projects, are we actually eligible for these grants? Sometimes it's a really great project, but there's no way that what we're trying to submit it under is it gonna pass? And we've had that issue before with some of the grants, that they wouldn't fall under FEMA, or they wouldn't fall underneath the category that we're trying to push it for. And so then we have to look at, and as a small town that has a pretty large per capita, we don't apply, we're not applicable to some of the more urban grants. So then you have to look at, again, if you have any RFPs that are out there, again, the compliance, you're looking at your application instructions. And then we have to get approval. Sometimes we have to go to the town, we almost always have to go to a town meeting because it's almost always over 20 grand. Some of them are small though, we get $10,000 ones, we just got a $15,000 one for human services not long ago. So some of those don't necessarily have to be approved because it's almost like through money. They're pretty easy processes, they come in and they get the funds. But they still have to be recorded and they still have to clear out. Then we submit the project, again, it really depends on the grant. So some of them are they're very clear, where it's like, here's all your paperwork, you need to submit it, here's where you submit it, here's the person you submit it to, and this is gonna be your contact. Love those people. Most of them are, hey, send it to like Murphy's office, and we'll let you know. And then if you get the money, it's like, we're gonna put, like we just did, what was the last one we did? It was under like cultural arts. And, when we were doing, it was road work. Yeah, it was was it the guide rails? And it was under like cultural arts, and we were trying to fit it in to something that it didn't fit into, but there was extra money, and that's how we got it. And so that's always a huge challenge, because their platform is set up obviously for the type of grant it was supposed to be. And so we end up going back and forth with reps in the state of how do we make this work, and that takes forever. And they're like, bear with us, we're working on it, we'll get you your money. Letters of support, so as you're applying for these things, it has become more and more imperative that we have community letters of support, not just town. So in the past, it was like, get some staff members to fill out a form and say, hey, yes, of course we want this. And now it's more, what does your community want? And so it's more and more imperative that we reach out to the community and find out if they actually support this project. And so we try to do that. Again, when you have a week, it's hard, but if you're planning these way in advance and you know you have support and you've already done surveys and you've already done these things, it's a lot easier to compile that data. Once we get the award letter, it normally goes through the first selectman's office. And then after that, there's a lot more paperwork that goes to it, and then we kind of wait. And then whenever, if we're a reimbursement, then you start your project, and it depends on how much the town will allocate to you. So like we're doing HUD right now, we have $1 million grant, we were allocated $250,000. So we can't go over $250,000. We have to submit the money first, then wait for a reimbursement to then get more money to continue the project. Other ones, like I said, are a lot smaller, where they either give us the money up front. Cabrera's grant that we just had gave us the money up front, but now you've got to make sure that you can verify exactly where that money went and make sure that you have no commingling funds and anything like that. And we do that pretty well, because, and luckily we have enough that we've separated. A lot of other towns have multiple projects going at the same time, and so it gets a little trickier. We most of the time do not. And then it comes down to the project implementation. Again, that's something the grant committee should have a voice in. Right now, we don't have that. And so it's really, however, the project manager and facilities kind of can feel like they can handle that project. So with our HUD grant, it was a lot bigger, and so it started, and then it was, you know what, this is probably something better handled, so we went out to BMP, and we got a project manager for that project. Other ones, it's really, you know, it's our facilities project manager in-house that's running around trying to facilitate and making everything kind of work, along with people who still work here, or the community that's trying to drive on the road, or all those pieces. So that's something to look at as well, along with, again, those prevailing wages. Who are we hiring? Are they meeting the charter requirements? And again, a lot of that has to do with grant size. The financial management, I'll let Leslie talk about that. I put down, you know, basic practices, but I'll let Leslie talk about what she does on this.
What we have with the conversion to our new software with Munis, we have set up project codes for every grant project that we're going to be using. So there's a separate expense line specifically for every grant that we can tie everything back to. It makes it cleaner, easier. You put in your budget and you can't spend any money that's not part of that budget. It makes the tracking much easier. And we also try very hard in our office. There have been times that we have voided checks and reissued because we make sure that all expenses for grants are on a single self-check. As in, we could have 3 invoices to the same vendor in a week, but if one is for a grant project, it gets its own check. If one, and it depends on we are very particular because it makes it cleaner and easier on the reporting end. And we are required on most of these grants to submit quarterly reports, that tells you how much money did you spend and where are you in the budget. And it's not just how much did you spend, it's the full detail, it's the check proving you paid it and the invoice to go with it. So that's why we pay very close and particular attention to that, so that we have that data readily available whenever it is asked for.
And don't pay anything out of any other fund.
Yeah, correct. Yes,
They all have to be, the checks all have to be cut out of the finance office.
yeah, and out of the capital fund. We make sure that everything is run through our office. I mean, we made, when we had handled the ARPA money, we did give money out to local nonprofits, but all invoices filtered through our office because of the reporting requirements. Because if you do not want to have to work with sub-agencies for the reporting, because you can't guarantee what their reporting process is going to look like, if they're going to keep records as detailed as you do. So it is always easier if the town cuts all the checks directly to the vendor.
Can I
So-
ask a question?
Mhm.
I was just going back up, this Jen question, I guess, so the project proposal under the section 2. Define the scope, the outcomes, budget and timeline. When you're looking for budget and timeline, like what plus or minus on the budget has to be presented and, yeah, is that so I mean, if it's like plus 200 minus 50%, then we can do that estimate internally, but if you need like a plus 20% minus 20%, then you need a bid, so.
Sure.
Yeah, what level of detail do you need?
So it really, it depends on the grant. So I will say a lot of the ones that come from either Blumenthal, Murphy or the lawyer's office. It's just give us what you're looking at doing and then we'll fill in the blanks later. Like, is it a project worthy to go up through the state? Right? So there's not a lot of detail. The ones, so then after you get the awards, so for example, when we got our HUD grant to do the $1 million project here that we're still working on. That was one of the ones that we got awarded to HUD. Well, we're not urban housing, right? So that was one of the ones we had to kind of play with how we're gonna fit all this in. Okay, great. When they ask you, now they're asking for your budget, right? And it depends on the agency of which gets your grant of the detail that they're requiring.
Yep.
What I have learned, because I took this on and I'm still learning, but what I have learned is less is more sometimes. And so I was trying to be very detailed at the beginning where I was like, okay, here's your bid, here's your estimate, here's your whatever, and that's what we're putting in. And then things happen, right? You're on a project, something breaks, something whatever, and now you've got to resubmit a budget. And sometimes that could take months to get back because they're like, no, you're not shifting a line. And so now you're just gonna give that money back. Or you're just gonna, you're gonna have to pay for that on your own end, even though you might have extra funds on the construction side. So some of it is better to know, if you know the project ahead of time and you know exactly what you're looking at, you can break it down to say if you have a $500,000 grant, about 300,000 of it is gonna go towards construction, 200,000 of it's gonna go towards paving. You can break it out of, in something like that and keep it pretty simple. Other ones want exact, what's your estimate? Where's it going? They want it all tagged and you just have to function within whichever agency it ends up kind of landing into. The percentage wise, like if we're doing a 20%, so if we get a $500,000 grant, we are gonna do 20% to $600,000 grant, right? So that budget is all broken down per payment. As you send them in of how much we owe versus how much is left to the grant, so that you can keep track of it that way, because at the end, if you don't spend it all, you're also, you're doing it at a 20% and a 80%. Is that, and then depending on, timeline is really, it depends on when you get your grant. So I will say most of them, they're just asking if it's shovel ready. They ask you to put an estimate on there, but you never know when you're gonna receive that grant. So you can say October 26th, that's when we're ready to go. You might not see that money until 27, and so you can't really rely on that. It's just, they wanna know, are you ready now? Or is this something that's like an idea that then you might be ready in 3 years? And most of the time, you're not gonna get the grant unless you're shovel ready. So it really kind of puts an onus to have us preparing ahead of time.
And on the other side on that, Katie, most of them that we do get awarded, they do have a spend timeframe,
A
like,
duration.
yeah, I mean,
3 or 5
you
years.
usually have 3 to 5 years to complete the grant. So we have not had any where we have failed to meet the timeline. So,
Are these, this one's federal and are the rest of them state?
Which number are you?
So,
It says there's one federal here, and I
the
just wondered, do you have
PGF.
one federal grant or all of these federal grants, or the rest of them, are these all state grants?
it fluxes
It-
depending on, so like some of
There's
the.
one federal
NPG
grant?
well, usually,
That's the one I coded it, because it's a federal community project, so
Mhm.
they come from federal money, but it gets siphoned through state funds.
Okay.
Yeah.
And have you ever applied for a deep grant before?
We were yes, we
Yes,
have. We did not get it,
You
but
did
that was,
not.
well, that's not
Okay.
true. We got it and we as a town decided that we weren't ready
we declined.
for that type of a grant
Okay.
after we saw the parameters. So that's the other thing. Sometimes you get awarded these grants, they all look really great. And then as you start reading through all the fine print, you're like, ooh,
There was a reason
Oh,
that
there's
you
a-
wanted to.
there's a
pull
lot
out
more to it,
Okay.
and the town might not be amenable to that at that moment. So then you have to make a decision there too. So.
So there's one federal grant right now on the table?
Well, it doesn't,
No.
These
You're
are
not
just
sure?
examples.
These are.
these are just
examples.
examples.
Oh, okay.
So like, one of the ones that, that I would look at for, the Economic Development Commission for some of the things you wanna do would be USDA, Department of Agriculture, they have a rural grant program for 10,000, population 10,000 or less. That's not, but there's more stuff like that. So there's lots of grant programs, but these are some of the ones we've used, I'm assuming we've
These
used
are
a lot
common.
common
These
in
are-
the past.
You see on a yearly basis that we apply for, and or they come every other year, or it's just something that's like, we're almost like a through. Where they're like, so we have one for like the transit, where they're like, it's a grant, it's considered a grant, but you're pretty much guaranteed that money. You just have to fill it out. If you don't fill out the paperwork, you don't get it. If you do, you're gonna get the money. They've already budgeted for you to get a cut.
I was just surprised, I didn't know if when you were talking about affirmative action for grants, if that was on a current federal grant application that was required? Or if these types of requirements are for states,
They're for all.
They're for all.
So, right, so
all that are potentially on the table.
anything,
Anything,
yes,
okay.
yeah.
Mhm.
So then so after the finance piece, the reporting piece, so Leslie started talking about it a little bit. So depending on the grant, some are semi-annual, some are quarterly. And then some of them are kind of like, let me know when you're done, because we didn't give you that much money and we just don't want to deal with it. Just make sure that you give us all the receipts. So they all depend on kind of who's at the helm on it. Some are now, a lot more of them are portal based, and I will say that's something new, that every single time we get something, now you're loading a new portal and you're trying to navigate that. And so that's kind of a tricky piece as well. So I will say from my end, it's a little challenging, especially if you're not aware of some of these other larger agencies.
So, for this one, for example, who does the submitting of the progress and the financial reports? If you hire a third-party project manager, that's something that they do?
I do.
You do?
We have
So
to.
they send to me where they're at and what's completed
Uh-huh.
and what percentage they're
Yeah.
at. And then I compile it and then I send it with my quarterly report and then get that verified and signed off on.
So in theory, one more second, and I'm sorry, if you were to go through it outside PM, you could flush that requirement down to the project manager to
You,
do those.
we have not, let's put it that way. I can get you an answer on that one. My guess is probably yes, it could be part of the project.
Uh-huh.
We haven't had large projects like that we've had to, But if we ended up getting a very large contract at some point or contract, we could absolutely end up doing that.
I'm just looking
Yeah.
at what
What could be
the
cut down.
committee can help with and what needs to be done by,
Yeah.
you know, this building, right?
mhm.
And if we are going to a third party project manager, I mean, to me, that seems like
Their role.
it does, yeah, I mean, of course, they have to like update the status of the project, but if there's required submittals. Then that to me seems like something that could be transferred to those.
Right.
Sorry.
No, to piggyback what you're saying, a lot of towns, but more municipalities do have outside consultants, and I think we talked about that at one time.
Mhm.
I don't know what happened, so I just wondered how, that obviously didn't move along.
It did so. And I mean, I will say, you know, I did try to reach out to Scrog. And I had those lovely women who, Juliet and Renata, who I love so much. And they were wonderful, but even they were like, Jen, where's your team? And I'm like, I'm a team of one, and they're like, this is crazy, like, like, how are you doing that? And I'm like, well, we'll get what we can get done, you know, and then, that's the problem though, is that we probably could get a lot more grants, there's a lot more out there. I am only one person to submit these things, I'm only one person to gather the information, to disseminate, to try to see if departments can do their part, all the things, and so as one person, along with, it's not my only function. You know, a committee is huge with that factor, I think. You know, even just bringing things to the table that says, oh, we're applicable, like, we can actually get this. What do we have? You know, and those types of things are really, really helpful than me, like, blowing through and saying, okay, what do you need? Oh, you need this, whatever, you know, and I'm like, okay, I think I can get that. And I look through and I say, well, there's this, maybe, you know, now we're kind of wasting our time of, are we applicable for it? Are we not? Did they get the right information? All the things, and now I'm not focusing on the larger grants that we get, like Steve and the CFP grants and those type of grants. That normally come within a week that you gotta, you know, get in. So,
Can I ask
Yeah.
just a question with that too? Because kind of on the same vein of that, when we're reaching out to, you know, whoever or the company getting this progress report and seeing how far along, like, how do we actually know that's really where they're at? Like, we're just trusting their word, like it's a road project. How do we know they're 35% done with the road? Is our public works checking in, then reporting
we have
to
a project
the
manager,
office?
but I will say that we also normally have some sort of architect, if it's a like for DPW.
Okay.
We had an architect, right? And they're the ones that show up and they say, okay, we're here. This is how far along we are, and now you can release this much money. It's built in within the contract, so it's like, if you're 30% done, you get this much of your money. Once you're like 70% done, you get this. And then we've got to get a COI to cover everything, and then you're clear.
Okay.
And then, you know, then they can get paid out the rest. The thing is to note as well, though, they're not, I'm making it seem clean cut, they're normally not clean cut. So it'll be like, we have a construction project, a paving project, and then some sort of add-on, like a guide rail, right? I'm just throwing out that because it's normally a construction project. And so all three of those are different vendors, right? And so one of them might have an architect that does all the things. The other one is, you know, we're just, obviously the road's done when it's done, you know, and you have somebody go look at it, your project manager that we have in-house. And then the other one could take forever because they can't put the guide rail up until, you know, the weather changes or and so you're holding it, right? So you've completed these pieces and now all of a sudden you're like 6 months later, you're like, well, where are we with this? You know, and people tend to like forget that all of a sudden now you still gotta close it out. And then you've got to kind of beg for all the invoices and the things.
And is there like a department head that's kind of like they're checking into and then reporting it back to like the first selectman's office? Like, I would assume that Public Works would be that go-between that the project manager would be speaking to, because they're in charge of public works for the town, and then the public works would then be reporting it to the office of the first selectman to let them know what's going on. Is that how, I'm just trying to
As of right
understand
now.
this process.
As of right now, how it works is as the project's going on, I'm normally checking in and saying, hey, what's going on with this? Because I have a quarterly report due and I'd like to put in as many, you know, invoices as I can to get a reimbursement.
Got
Like,
it.
can you please provide, you know, any kind of update?
But not all grants in theory will be public works related, but I do agree that the department where the grant falls under should be accountable to its delivery. So
Yeah.
for example, if it were like we got a grant money for a zoning improvement, you know, or like something.
Or like,
software, you know.
or something, it would be,
like
yeah, whatever
that
department.
The department head should be accountable to report into the select.
So
board.
you guys are jumping ahead.
It's
And
not
I
an
love
extra
that.
work for you,
No,
like,
I
I'm just
love
trying to
that.
think about, like,
It's one of our challenges.
it's a lot of
right?
extra.
Because
That's
you're
the
not
last
hurt.
page.
Okay.
No, no,
Okay.
you're fine.
But no, it's good, but that's actually one of the challenges is because a lot, and on the other end, right? And I think it's wonderful, we have boards and commissions and departments who will apply for grants, never tell me. And then they get them, and now they're doing things, but then there's nobody really accountable for those pieces. Right, so they may be smaller grants, the first selectman may sign off on them because they're smaller. And then they're doing the pieces and then probably 8 or 9 months go by and all of a sudden they didn't close them out. And I get some sort of email and I'm like, what is this? And then we end up backtracking and then I've got to clear it out.
What does a closeout mean? What is that exactly?
So once you're all done, your project is complete, they will request a formal final closeout, which is just your final payment, showing that all your invoices. Some of them will want you to resend your entire packet, like as a whole. Some of them, if it's portal based, will just ask you to verify your last one, and then they'll say you're not done until we verify and actually tell you that you're good. Some of them will say, you know, question a few things and just say, you know, what about this receipt, or what, we don't really understand this invoice, like, how does it have to do with X, Y, and Z, and then you just have to kind of explain it in a narrative. And then once everybody's good, they'll send you something saying, you're good, you're done.
In the old days, it required a visitation from.
Yeah, they
where
don't
the
come.
grant came from. You know, and some project manager, yeah, will come down here like me and say, show me give me your file. That's all you do,
Right.
so give me the file and I'll check through it, and if it looks orderly and everything, you're good,
Right.
otherwise.
And I'm assuming like the final payment's withheld until that closeout is done.
No, you
And a lot
can't,
of-
you cannot close out a grant until all payments are made. You
But I
have to
mean-
spend all the
okay.
money
Got it.
in order to close out the grant.
But on the reimbursement ones, basically, like, you have to have paid out everything before you're like, okay, we're done. And then they would send you your final
No,
payment?
no.
No, okay,
Well,
It depends on the grant.
okay, okay.
On steep grants, because, I mean, we submit quarterly reports on those.
Mhm.
So anything that we paid out during that quarter is reported.
Mhm.
And they will reimburse us for anything that is on that report at the end of that quarter. Now, we could get towards the end of the life of the grant.
Mhm.
And we may not, there could still be technically $10,000 left on that grant.
Mm.
But we don't have anything else to apply to it because we've completed all of our work. Then we have to submit the paperwork that says, no, we have completed, the project is complete, it came in under budget. And then they just funnel that money back to someone else. But I have been on many webinars with the state.
You don't wanna do that.
And their comment is overspend because you don't want to give any money back.
Right.
Because then that becomes your story. Oh, they never
Right.
use it all, so don't give them any,
Correct.
you know,
Yes.
yeah.
And then you get a budget, a project end date extension, so if you still have money and there's some reason, blah, blah, blah. You can apply for that, and then, you know.
Okay.
And we've also had ones, right, along those lines where we sat there and we were like, okay, well, we didn't apply for this because we didn't think we could, we came in under budget. We would love to add this to our project because we're seeing that we have about $15,000 left over, and you just need to get approval.
Mhm.
And then once they send it back saying, yes, we'll approve that, that makes sense, like you wanted to put a new fire alarm in because, you know, whatever.
Mhm.
And then they'll approve that, and then you can submit the rest of it. So again, though, but then now you're pushing
Mhm.
all the timelines that you had set, you know, and you don't know, you gotta wait for all of that. And so when I make it sound like there's an easy turnover, the federal.
It doesn't sound easy,
it's-
even though
it's-
you're
but
saying
it's
the words,
long.
it doesn't seem easy.
But the federal, it's a lot longer, right? And there's no, like, for example, you know, with the HUD right now, the department shut down. We've switched over 3 different reps right now. So I don't even, like, half the time you don't even know who to contact, and because it's portal based, when you go to submit your report, it's going to the old like list serve, and you can't change that because it was put in by them. So then you have to contact them and say, help, and here's like what I sent out, and then you hope for a response saying, yeah, we forwarded over. And so those are the types of things that you have to bear with it. And so a lot of the times people are like, why aren't this project done? And you're like, well, we got held up. Like, you know.
Well, that's what I was kind of bringing back with like the department heads or whoever's running the departments that those projects are kind of falling under. It's like, what is their accountability and like input in this to make sure, like, it kind of seems odd that like it's one person that has to man all of these departments. And they're just like coming, give me money, can I spend, can I spend? And they don't even know necessarily what's going on or what has actually been done.
Correct. Correct. And then,
Okay.
like I said, we have some departments who go and do it on their own. And then I find out from the state, they're like, wait a minute, this was done totally like, or partially incorrectly. And then they'll send me what that person did. And now I've got to sift through what they did to figure out where the issue is in order to resubmit. And I'm like, okay, it's easier if it comes to me and I can set it up and then kind of go back to the department and say, okay, well, now you're here, where's your report?
Mhm.
Versus looking at somebody's already predetermined report and figure out where the issue was. So there's that.
Okay.
And then, where were we? So then for auditing and monitoring, most of the time, it's just, once a year, it goes through our auditing process. You know, we don't, like I said, we're getting some bigger grants, but typically they're under or $750,000, so it's a single audit. And then the other audits, they can audit us at any time, most of the time. I mean, I haven't had them do that. But they could at any time, like I have, they can come down and look at my folders whenever they want. But because a lot of it is electronic, they have it, so.
I want to go back to in between 1 and 2.
Okay. Yeah.
And the fact that many of these things have to go to a town meeting,
Yes.
which is huge because that changes the order of steps. Because it has to go from finance to the Board of Selectmen, and then they have to call a town meeting. And that's based on usually the dollar amount, but now, it's LoSiP that said anything we use the local capital improvement, grant on has to have been on our capital plan. But those are small, most of them are small, and they wouldn't normally trigger a town meeting issue. So, because that trigger is $20,000.
And that's what I was trying to figure out, like with the whole shovel ready thing, it's like, how much are we putting out there to invest to get it ready? And then we don't even know if we're gonna get it, but we still have to go through the townspeople.
So what we've done in the past is if we know we have a project that we want, right? And it is something that the town has said, no, we really do need this. Then we've almost like pre-authorized at a meeting where we said, we are going out for grant, like for this one.
Mhm.
Would you approve this?
Yeah.
And the town goes, yeah, that's a great project. And then that way it kind of opens.
As long as
the
it's
door.
grant funded.
Right, but but there should be, and I believe I could be wrong, we kind of pulled some money at one point, maybe last year, I don't know if we pulled it back, I can't remember. For those 20%, 10%, 30%, so that we had a little kitty going. So if we went for something, we knew that we at least had this much that we could throw at a project if we needed to.
Yeah, now they all have, well, the LoSiP ones and the steep ones all have to be approved by a town meeting. Which is an obstacle for all the smaller things.
Can they be approved after we've
While
actually
it's,
applied for them, or? Because it
yes,
seems like,
yes,
know,
but you
we-
cannot do anything on them until you get,
But usually there's a long time lag between,
oh,
between
we-
when you
yeah.
get accepted for the grant and when you would actually start. It doesn't start the next week.
Well, when a good example is it took 3 years to finally get the Delara grant after it was approved. After.
Yeah.
And they changed it from one where they were going to give us the $1 million and then we would just spend it down and report as we went, like most grants had been, to a reimbursement. So now we had to go back to the town meeting and say, would you give us a fund,
Yeah.
a cash allocation that we can spend down on this project. And then when we get a reimbursement, that's what we're doing now.
Mhm.
And there have been others that have changed from fully, fully funded to, oh, you're gonna have to, now you're going to have to pay 20%, you're gonna have to pay 25%. Surprise, yeah, and the town has already approved it and we think we're ready to go, and then.
It's not nice.
But I
It's not
think,
nice.
I think the point that you're making is we can apply as a town for all the grants in the world, and then the ones that we get approved on, we can then go. to
Yes,
The town.
The town meeting,
yeah,
yeah, and so there, I just thought there were some that had to be approved before you could
Some
apply
do.
for it, so that's not true in all instances, some,
yes,
the town has to approve it before you.
Yeah.
can apply.
like, I think,
And then
Well,
that's the
they
board of
want to
selectmen as
support,
well.
and they wanna show a meeting
We
where
have
it
to-
was approved for you to go for the grant. They don't wanna waste time if the community doesn't want it. Most of the time though, I could be wrong too, I don't think it's a town though, I think it's a board of selectmen that has to approve it, saying that they can apply.
yes, that has to be.
Yeah, there needs, in a lot of cases, there does need to be proof of approval to apply. In order to apply.
That's
So
why.
that's like the burn building, right, where there are all these letters saying, yes,
Mhm.
we want this, and then ultimately the town, the community was not in favor of it, so I can see, the risk.
Well, there was a brownfields grant
Oh, right.
that never got
Oh, yeah,
to
right.
anyone in the town. In government until it needed to go in 24 hours later, and
It's too
and well, it
There was more
it
to
included a lot of use of town resources and financial implications on an
Mhm.
ongoing basis for the town. And anybody who spends any time in here knows that nobody has
Sure, that's why this is good.
has
Right. I
time.
mean, some of the other things too with grants, it's important is that when you're looking at them, like, for example, that brownfield one, when it landed on my desk. I had to call up the environmental services.
Yeah.
And you had to get like a certification for each of the sites
Mhm.
in order to be able to put the grant through. And they were like, oh, that could take up to 3 to 4 weeks. And I'm like, well, I have 24 hours. And so I ended up finding someone, magic. And he's like, oh, I'm at a conference right now, but I'll see what I can do, because they understand municipalities, this is kind of what happens, they tried, they couldn't make it happen. He was like, it's gonna take too long, and ultimately, I'm like, I can't push this through either without those things, so it's really important when we get these, if we know we have time, though you might still be working on your, like, the narrative part, if there are either legal requirements or either some sort of certification or anything else that might go along with it, it's important to share it, because then we can go ahead and start the state processes while you're still filling in the narrative, so when it comes in, we can meet deadlines. Because a lot of times you only get a month, you know, it's not like they're sitting there for 6, 8 months, you know.
And
it's
with
not
those,
very
like,
long.
if you need a site plan or you need certification, are there financial costs with that? And where are we paying for that as a town? Ahead of time, like, is there a fund, you know?
It's a small.
There is a small dollar amount set aside every year in the budget
Mhm.
for architectural or engineering services. It used to be, the number was smaller than it is now. The Board of Finance made a conscious effort to increase that line
So we didn't get.
about 2 years ago, so that we could be prepared for grants.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, because it's like, if we don't even have the money to do the pre-work to even get it, then we're automatically eliminating grants that we could actually probably get, because we don't have the money to start it. So, okay, that makes
Yeah,
sense,
the whole
yeah.
thing just kind of goes around, comes
Yeah,
around.
yeah,
And so that's why we're trying to.
okay.
And then the last is really, you know, the closeout, which we talked about a little bit already, but we have to keep in our grant records for 3 to 5 years. And a lot of them are like, you know, with internal audits and what have you, so I'm not sure exactly, we just got a new auditor. I'm not sure, they may want to keep it longer, but we keep them anywhere between 3 and 5 years internally, depending on what the grant specifies. The other thing, just kind of as for like a conversation, and we've already kind of started it, I just put together a very rudimentary Excel sheet. Just kind of going over some of the things maybe to talk about of just verifying eligibility. You know, noting deadlines, what does that look like? Is there a limit? You know, if it's a week out, is it something that's like, sorry, that's not viable, you know, those types of things. confirming funding amount and what's available. Just reviewing what those grant objectives are and with those town goals, what are those town goals? Identifying with lead departments, that kind of goes back to what you guys were saying of, who is gonna be in charge of this ultimately, right? So I can do the administrative part of it, but ultimately somebody is in charge to make sure that all of those financial pieces and the invoices and the management is being done and then delivered in a package to me to do the administrative part. Defining what project scope we're looking for, checking with staff, what resources do we have, like where are we capping out with that? Long-term impact, this also includes, committees and commissions and boards, like if they're looking for things, they're an external body, they're not here every day. So how are they communicating with, the committee or me or anything else, like how does that flow? And then, compliance and legal, just obvious, those are obvious ones, just making sure that we're doing all the things we're supposed to be doing. Determining a budget, like where are we at with that, and how far can people go? Confirming any kind of matching funds, checking reimbursement structures. I highlighted, and you guys don't see it because it's dark, it's really dark, sorry if you can't see it. I didn't think about that with black and white. But it's assigning responsibility, gathering support materials, what does that look like? And scheduling draft reviews. So really, those are the key points where I'm like, okay, the committee is gonna be like a powerhouse when it comes to that section. But what does that look like? And then post submission, like, should there be a review? How did this flow? What can we do better? Like, preparing for any other awards that we may have. A lot of them too, people wanna do photo ops. Everybody likes to come down and do a ribbon cutting and doing all the things. And so what does that look like? And so just food for thought. I thought it might help with conversation. And then the last one, it was just, kind of the current challenges that we're facing. I know that at last night's meeting, I kind of threw this together today. At last night's meeting, it was the Board of Selectmen is the one that's gonna approve this committee. And how are we gonna lob that over with them to, get them to approve it so that we can move forward? And so I think that these 7 items alone are a pretty good starting point on why that we need a committee.
Just got a question for you. Are you getting input from Rex, Sprague, Cost about grants availability and how they're doing it and what's out there?
Yes,
I mean,
I'm on listservs, but ultimately most of them go to the first selectman. And sometimes I'm FOI'd on them, or FYI'd on them, and sometimes I'm not. And so it's not a great system. But right now I'm not a member on a lot of those. It's helpful when you're a member because then you can automatically be on their listserv. And you can put your own email address in there and they'll shoot out all of those things to you. Otherwise, I've done pretty good with Scrog because I built some relationships over there that I'm like, hey, if you hear anything, like shoot this over to me, or, right now I have them trying to bring back one of their boards for just grant conversation because they don't really have a grant person anymore. They have like it's like a per diem woman over there. And so it was like, well, maybe we can all talk and collaboratively, if there's something intertown or some kind of whatever, maybe that could work too with a larger grant. So,
Yeah, that just seems weird, yeah, cause I've heard you say like, if I happen to catch something, I'm like, isn't there like some list that like when stuff is being posted,
There's
it's going
some.
to
There are
towns?
too many lists.
There's
Yeah.
yeah. But then the other part about it too is that
We all get.
the school does a really great job with their educational piece, right? They do a really great job. But they don't look for infrastructure grants, but they're technically town buildings. So, and it's tax money, it's taxpayer money, right? And so that's something too, that while we're looking, we can get a grant to help them with their infrastructure building issues, right? And I know right now they're looking for something to bond for large projects.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here going, but I get infrastructure grants that can go to that, I just need to know what's happening. And so that's another collaborative thing within a town of like, what is happening? How do we know about it? And how, because then you can start planning for what type of grants you're looking for, and then you can join those serves. And then they send it to you, because you don't normally have a long time either when they send them to you, but you do have options there too.
Doesn't the school board come to the Board of Finance and say, "This is what we need"?
Normally they come because, so it's interesting, they have 2 different chunks of money.
That's it.
So they're allocated funds, and so within those funds, they'll say, hey, we need to fix the stairs. So they have funds, right? So they're gonna fix the stairs, right? That's fine. But potentially, there could be a grant that does like an ADA ramp and stairs. You know, and you could do it that way, you know, and so there's just different ways of looking at it, and I think and no fault of their own, that they're looking at educational grants, they're not looking at construction grants. And so maybe we can help them, you know, or, you know, when there's other things going on in town, like we don't own the historical society, and, you know, but there was things that we gave out a lot of money towards ARPA, but for the paving and the things like that, maybe we could help them out and find them a grant. You know, those are things that, you know, we're funding it, one way or another, we're funding. it.
Yeah, it just seems like a lot of work for you or your position that keeps you from actually maybe doing
Doing
the other part of your job. And it's like, how are we actually holding the department heads accountable for their departments and for their needs, and being able to communicate that to the office of the first selectman, and then that getting into action?
Yes.
So
That's-
in larger
We're gonna
communities,
try to get that to happen.
that might happen, but we are a small town, so there's
Yes.
a lot of people wear a lot of hats.
Mhm.
And so you might have a grants writer, or, you know, and they might be funded by the administrative costs they're allowed to get, say, from one of the federal grants. And they float and do other things.
Mhm.
I think that was talked about at one time as well, and I don't know what
Well,
happened.
then I know, like, Steve and I had a conversation once, twice maybe, about
Three times maybe.
possibly another town that we were talking to that was also looking for a grant
Yes,
writer.
yeah, that was right, yeah.
and having
Yeah.
two
Right.
part-time, you know, grant writers to make a whole. And it might be helpful, though, you know, one of the conversations was, okay, are they all looking for the same grant, then are you gonna miss out?
Mhm.
And the other side is you're not always looking for the same type of projects, right? And sometimes if it's a bigger project, now you maybe can, you know, help each other out.
We do have not a great, Sprague is not great compared to Naugatuck Valley and some of the other regions.
I would
who
agree
are
with that.
on top of grants and helping their municipalities. I'm on the record with that. Sorry, Sprague, you got a new executive director.
So one of the things, and sitting at the table here as a neophyte, when it comes to grants and municipal government and finance and funding, things like that. I have a bunch of questions in my head, and one of them has always been like, how do you find out about grants? Is it something that going forward, we're gonna have the anticipation that, or the expectation that someone, warm body in town is going to be actively looking for grants? Does Cabrera's office, anyone's office call you and go, hey, we have this? Is it a combination of both? Is there a particular season of the budget that grants pop up? Or is it like always, you know, springtime, always fall predominantly? When should a grant committee be focusing on this stuff and having timelines and, you know, getting things kind of warmed up and revving the engines, just anticipating things are coming out? It seems like, and I know Liz, you sent me a lot of stuff. I know, and Leslie and Jen, you both sent me things from the EDC standpoint as, hey, these are grants you might be interested in, look at these. And I've been so overwhelmed by what it is, who it is, what's involved, like, and just this pure, you know, volume of information to read through just to find out what might be pertinent to you. I mean, this is a huge undertaking. I don't know how one person has done most of it. So it's, in my mind, it would be, obviously, we need a streamlining of how all this stuff is gonna work in our town, and it's gotta be a proactive thing. One of the things we've kicked around in the EDC, and this is gonna come out as a very radical idea, and, but it's one I think needs to be chewed on if it's gonna be a thoughtful, progressive town, is a lot of the towns, when they have their planning and zoning commissions, they're separate. There may be worthwhile looking into having our planning cut off from our zoning. And have a planning and grant and economic development commission or a planning commission that encompasses all this stuff. And it is the idea melting pot. Let zoning do zoning, because that's 95% of what they do. I mean, I was not here in town when Rocky Corners went through. To my knowledge, that's the last time a planning issue went before planning and zoning. Every meeting I've been there has been zoning. And I'm probably glossing over a lot of things that I've missed, but the majority of stuff they do is people coming in there going, hey, can I put this on my property? The planning side of things is where I think our town traditionally has sort of lagged. As far as, and a lot of miscoordination, as far as missed opportunities. And it'd be nice if we had that streamline of, you know, like you said, department heads or planners and finance and everybody in the same room all at once. To not have to do so many steps and miss out on talking to the right people at the same time, just have all the right brains in the room and go, yeah, that's what we're gonna do. And then you can take that to the town meeting and go, we've all talked about this, and this is what we decided. So,
Well, I think,
again, I'm speaking from a,
I'm.
a standpoint of not having done this for very long.
Right now, I kind of like to kick it over to, and maybe you can let us know, like, how did you find out about
Eric.
the grant? Okay, or how, tell us, how did you find out, and then did you follow up? Because that might be helpful for us, because that's the one that's in the pipeline right now.
Yeah, so what we did, I mean, we are on listservs and we got a memo saying, we're putting out this grant and it's in 2 months. We then talked amongst ourselves and said, okay, should we do this? Should we go forth and try and, get money, and what would we do? We came up with 2 or 3 ideas, which we proposed to the Board of Selectmen. And Board of Selectmen said, we like this one. We said, okay, we'll work on that one. And at that point, Cynthia put together a grant which sent to Jen and Leslie. And and it was, in a week she put that together. So amazing amount of work.
It's not my first one, but my first municipal, because I'm more of a science writer. So the other thing was Deep really didn't have any format. It was just put some things together. So
Sometimes that
that's-
happens.
That's usually the organic process
it
for all of
was
them.
make your own backbone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Format.
you
So I
know,
hope it's
We're not
okay. I
looking
hope you
for
like it.
The data, the scientific data, like I'm sure you're used to,
Yeah,
percentages and,
so,
we actually do have some options, because there is somebody in Scrog who, about 3 weeks after the grant announcement said, if you need help writing or reviewing, I'll do that for you. And so I think maybe the next step should actually be to send it to her and say, review this, tell us what you think, and then
Absolutely.
bring it back to,
Absolutely.
bring it back.
So you've
We
been
don't
the
have
only
time.
one reviewing grants before they go out? It's just
Oh,
you?
So, I mean, I will say, the
Stop.
finance office reads it and the first selectman normally reads it. And other than that, it goes out. Now, let me preface, as much as I love everybody tooting my horn here. Some of them are like the Blumenthal grants, they're pretty simplistic in their format when they first go out. It's once they're awarded. So that's, I think it's important to know. So like, you can lob something over with them, and if it looks good enough, they'll say, sure, here's the money. Right? And then after that, the fun begins, because now you've got to put everything together in very tight detail. And that's what happened with HUD, is that it was kind of like hey, here's an option. We'd love to do things. And then once HUD picked it up, they were like, no, we want to know exactly what you're doing, how many people are affected, who's involved, da, 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 da. And so then you have to go, okay, now I'm gonna get creative, and you have to write out the narratives. Which is really not the way we should be doing things, right? And we should have it all lined up before we send something out, so we know what we're getting into. So yeah, sometimes they're very easy, and sometimes there's a format that you have to be very specific, and they detail exactly how many parameters you have to put in order for them to even accept it, and they'll keep kicking it back.
No,
they
they
wanted
wanted
to
to
see
see what we came up with.
Yeah, some of them, like, they'll kick it back and say, we like that grant, we don't like this. So if you want us to continue on with the process, figure out how that goes away. And then you have to rewrite it and resubmit.
I mean, a lot of the federal monies, crank their earmarks. Well, politicians
Yeah.
get it,
Yeah.
and they use the link cards to the communities.
Yeah.
What do you want to do? Here, well, that sounds good. And then once they get into the nitty gritty, then they'll go back to, and, yeah.
yeah, it's, I don't think any 2 of them have worked the same way.
No, and they could be a pain in the butt because you don't get
Yes.
the answer you need in a timely fashion.
You
You just
don't.
keep asking. Cabrera's, I think, was like that.
Cabrera's was a little tough, yeah, but it was also a
Laura.
two-parter. They gave us money, they gave us a $700,000 grant, and then they broke it up 350. And so we thought it was gonna be one project, and then we had to break it into 2 and keep within the 350 parameter. So you're like, you don't wanna give money back, so now you're like, oh, okay, well, I wasn't planning on spending that much money here, but I'm actually like I have, you know, more of a project over here, so
Mhm.
how do I make this work, you know, and so I think the town ended up, if I'm wrong, yeah, I might be correct on that one.
With
A
the-
little bit of extra funds on either the window side or the gym side, one of them, we had to kind of finish it off after. 'cause it
Yes,
didn't-
anything that was, that we used, we're using the Delara grant for, we ended up. It ended up being a reimbursement instead of an upfront.
Right, and then you had to do something like
It
that.
was really nice when that, the Cabrera grants, actually, the money landed, within 6 months, maybe.
It took a bit, but again, that was one of the ones that
Yeah.
that was the cultural.
That
one,
was
actually.
the.
That was the one that ended up going to the cultural arts to do windows. So now you have to put it in for cultural arts.
Stained glass.
And depending on, like, so example, steep, depending on your project, it lands in different places.
Yeah.
Right, and so one time.
So no two
ECD,
steep
one
grants
time
are the same.
ECD, like you're not handling it with the same department, and each department handles a grant very differently.
Or different people.
And, right, and so once you're like, oh, I know steep, no, you don't.
When trying to contact the offices of political officials at the state level, federal level, are they receptive to you just calling and go, hey, do you have any grants available? Or is it, hey, you go look to our website and see what we have and you have to go parse this out yourself? Or is there a receptiveness on their end to say, hey, we have this funding, yeah, we can walk you through this. You know, we can, you know, yeah, let us know what you need, we'll get back to you. Is there that level of communication or?
So here's my take on grants. I think a lot of grants are handled with the first selectman because they're networking, right? And you're going to breakfasts, you're going to these meetings, you're doing the things, right? And so the first selectman ends up getting a lot of these notifications at these meetings, or they're like, hey, by the way, oh, I heard you talking about such and such. Let me send you over something that we're working on. And then that filters over to me. And so is there like a list? Sometimes it's not even a list. Sometimes it's not even something that might be on their website. It's just all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, we might have an extra 300,000. Like, tell me what you're thinking, you know, and then I'll send something
It's the
over.
people working in their office, like their little underlings and their interns that have the information, because they're the ones parsing through it all when it comes up in Washington at the state level.
Sure,
And it's not necessarily the elected official who knows where the money is.
sure.
So I wasn't sure what kind of relationships were on that level.
We have we have some, let's put it that way. We have a few people that we can reach out to. But I think majority of it is we wait for these listservs. And then we apply, and we know steep's coming, right? Like every year there's a steep grant. And then the MGP grants, that's FEMA, it's gonna go through, you know, emergency management, it's gonna happen. So we know those things are coming. It's the other ones, it's mostly like your CFP grants and, any other federal or anything else that you're, like the Blumenthal's, when you're, you know, they're like, hey, just apply, and there's about 10 different, departments that you can apply to. And that's where it gets tricky too, is you might have a project and then you go, where do I put it?
Has there ever been a townwide survey of people in town, like, hey, what kind of projects do you want to see?
There's never been a town where it's.
There hasn't.
And how much of like our budget that we're using is all coming from grants? Do we know, like, to do all these projects? I mean, because at the end of the day, if the road's jacked and we have to fix the road, if we don't have a grant, we still have to do it.
And it is, that's something we
So-
need to be better at. It is something we need to be better at. It is something that, like, for example, BPW. Say what the project, like, whatever, say whatever you want about the project, but we would have had to do that paving anyway. And so that paving would have been about $300,000. So for $106,000, we got the paving and a second floor.
Yeah.
So we didn't pay for, you know what I mean? We didn't pay for that. We would have been paying for the paving anyway. But the rest of it, obviously, now you're adding a project and kind of that goes to anything else we do. You know, it's when you're looking at a project, you can have a second floor, but now there's maintenance with the second floor. So what does that mean? And that's another closeout, right? It's like, now how are we maintaining?
Yeah.
But if you go back to the town meeting, on the budget, part of the presentation of the budget was which of those capital projects were being paid for by grants. And actually, most of the capital projects, the capital expenditures were being paid by grants or by capital reserve.
But I think that my point of asking that question is more of just how in this conversation with everybody and whatnot of how urgent it is to have some type of grant committee and to have some type of connection with the selectmen, the board of selectmen and the selectmen, because at the end of the day, if we're not getting that money, where's our mill rate? Where's our services? Where is our town? I mean, this is actually vital to the function
It's
and
certainly.
the small town
If it weren't for the
sustainability.
Grants that we received, a lot
Yeah.
of projects wouldn't have got.
We
Right, yeah.
have done a tremendous amount of deferred maintenance on the physical infrastructure in town, just in general, and nearly all of it has been grant funded. And, and that money is drying up. The
Yeah.
federal money is definitely drying up and
Yeah.
the state money is looking less, well, I don't know, the communication yesterday and today from the state budget is not wonderful, so. It's not wonderful to be a small town right now,
No.
No.
is a small town that is solvent.
Yeah.
Right, that right now. Yeah, so, I think that it might be a good idea for us, Leslie is making copies of the grant because we didn't think to do that.
Okay.
Right.
But while she's doing that, could one of you give us the overview? I mean, I read it, so, but we've had a couple of, well, at finance, you were describing what you wanted to do, and
This
we were very
opportunity is
supportive.
funding for waste reduction. And Deep is inviting for grant proposals to help municipalities.
Mhm.
And it's to develop and implement a wide variety of waste diversion programs. This is following up from their first round, which was $15 million to try pilot programs.
Mhm.
And they introduced who got them, what they were for. They were all there to talk about the programs, how it's going, challenges that came up with after they got the funding, and just get a good summary of
Mhm.
everything that happened in their progress. And then they switched to what this round is, which is not pilot, not trial. It's to look for permanent reduction, and it's half the amount. The pilot was $15 million. This round two is $7.5 million. And out of that 7.5, 5 million is for organics diversion, specifically to try to get out of the waste stream because of what Deep calls Connecticut's municipal waste trash crisis. And part of that is because the Hartford waste to energy plant closed without another one reopening, and the burden of the waste that was going waste to energy is greater than what they can manage with the current infrastructure. And because of that, some of the waste is getting shipped out to landfills out of state, which is also part of the increasing costs for municipal solid waste. So between the EPA and Deep, I've seen estimates, Metro Store says 25%. The EPA between 22 and 25%, probably sometimes more, probably sometimes less, is thought to be food scraps, organics that we wouldn't need to put in solid waste and pay for disposal, which right now those scraps, part of them could be going to landfills. We can instead compost them, have a plan to do that. If people are composting, that's fine too, but it's all about data right now.
Right.
And we can't really say much of anything other than we talked to some people, they said they'd be interested in doing it, but I think that's really the opportunity that if you can get your foot in there right now and get something,
Yes.
something that you could use to collect data in the future, this is where it gets good. Because now you have some money to do something, and then you can use that to get better grants, hopefully in the future. So I would look at it as if we got anything, it's a great opportunity to be able to learn more about what we're able to keep out of the waste stream, and it's an opportunity to get whatever kind of data you can. hopefully make it part of everybody liking to do it and that it grows. It wouldn't be great if we put this into action and don't have anybody doing it, if it's something that is voluntary. But we plan as part of our program to do community outreach. That's something that's going to be instrumental in teaching people about doing it who might be interested. There are some maybes, but there's also people who are already composting at home who don't have waste going into their scraps, and a number of people who compost but wanted it for other people. They would like that.
Is your grant application to do a study on this stuff, or is it to actually come up with an actual, hey, this is what we're gonna do?
It's to put composting units in town and put scraps in them and to give everybody a container. And we put bags into the compost bins, at least for a while, to get people used to it and to reduce the barriers for people who haven't done composting.
So the idea actually is to have 3
Bin,
bins around town where people can come and just drop off their compost.
which we'll get weights for, and if you want,
Sounds
we
good.
can even know who's putting it in. You could have an access panel with code to open it,
Or is to-
or you could have an app.
And what is Southington doing? You're right here.
I don't know.
So there's a
the-
indoor digestion something. So you just take it all up there. They process it, turn it into compost.
And they harvest gas, which is pretty cool. too.
In that,
Composting, or is it this traditional
It's
compost?
anaerobic
Oh,
compost.
so you can take these scraps and.
Exactly. It's
So
the thing that you could, you know, throw around.
Oh, yes, I saw that there was a charge for that.
Well, the containers are expensive.
Yeah.
But they're bear proof, rodent proof. There were some people who were interested in animals, and that's why they're designed to be like this, so you don't have anybody getting into
We
it.
had
We
a
had a
bear
thing up
visit
at
us
the-
3 times last night.
They're specifically in the specifications for these units that they're bear proof.
So we.
You
we
might
were
like
gonna
that.
put one up at the recycling center, and that was one of the things where we didn't want to attract animals. Because we didn't know how long or how quickly they were gonna be picked up.
Right.
So they might be bear proof, but it might still attract. How often would they be picked up?
As needed. Deep suggested these particular units, the Metro Store units. And Metro Store, when I talked to them, they said that it would, you would need to get a hauler to move it to Southington, which they knew, which would be the nearest place. But they suggested Peels and Wheels, which is about
yeah.
$50 per unit, but yeah, they don't do this area, so scrap that, we would need to, right, and so I was contemplating, I don't know, should we have our own truck for this,
Okay.
or?
That's
If
actually
that's
a
some-
question is, you know, we could probably do, you know, if our recycle guys could drive trucks on the highway with Red Al, they can't. They could just drive it up there and take, you know, they could collect once a week.
That would
Drive up.
require them to be CDL.
They,
They're not CDL
yeah,
right now.
well.
I'm just throwing it
No,
out
I
there
know,
as a.
But
Is the
that's
fire
probably
department
the
CPL?
cheapest way to do it.
I don't think that's in there.
Fire department drive,
Right.
town vehicles?
Pickup truck, because you're gonna have, you know, 3 bins worth of stuff.
Right,
You know,
and I didn't know what to put for the hauling in the grant. The grant's around $100,000, and I had put in to give a compost bin to everyone in the town, every household, but. Then we thought, why don't we address the 60% of people in the survey who said they would be interested in composting? Cause you can't give them to everyone to start off and expect, and I didn't know, like, are you asking for a year of hauling? Should you ask for 5 years of hauling? Maybe you ask for $100,000 and you get 50, or maybe you ask for $50,000 and you get 25. You're not gonna get anything if you don't show up and ask, but maybe they have the 5 million to give out, that's already been decided, maybe just showing up and we're trying to do better, maybe we'll get something that could help us going forward.
Include service, so it includes not just the bins. I didn't know if I read that.
So.
It includes the
was-
service
that
then
was
of the
one of my
hauling.
questions.
No,
And
we did, we would have to do it,
Put in money for that, we don't know exactly how.
right,
it will work yet.
But a lot of the times they won't cover they won't, in my experience anyway, they'll cover the apparatus and they'll cover like any kind of implementation of it, the bags maybe, things like that, but when it comes to that, the service part, like the
Right.
hauling part,
Right.
they're like, no thanks.
So.
But
maybe
they
that's the
started.
calculation.
Yeah.
If we had our guys do it, it would be about $3,000 a year.
Who are
Our guys.
Our guys, well. that
Like
would
somebody
be-
driving a truck to
Somebody
Southington.
driving a
So they would have to close the recycling center
Yeah.
for hours or after
We have-
hours, so they have to be two guys.
5 road crew.
But we also
That's
have, we
not, there's
also have
7.
two recycle guys.
And there's 2
Six.
recycles.
Right, they're talking about having the recycling attendants
Oops,
do that.
yeah.
Right.
That's a whole, well, okay.
So if we,
So I don't know, we're just looking at,
Right.
sidewalk thinking, we're
Right.
all thinking.
based on the
Mine.
pricing of Peels and Wheels, it's $50 to do a pickup and a haul to Southington per unit.
Mhm.
So it would matter if we had 3 units or if we had 1 unit.
Well, do we need, if there were going to be 3 in town, would there need to be 6? So that there would be an exchange, so that there was
No.
immediately another one available.
Now you just take the bag
You're
out.
taking
Yeah.
it, yeah.
You do what?
You just
Take
take
the
the
bag
bag out. You
Oh,
leave the.
okay,
yeah.
they don't have to move it.
Right.
Okay, that's good.
And do we know, just with, like, I know you did your survey for people like that were interested in it. Do we know the people that are currently paying for recycling in town? That demographic, if they're interested in doing this?
It was just specifically interested in composting for the.
I'm just wondering if they're already paying for recycling at
Right.
their home, they might probably already be
It
composting in some
doesn't
way.
include
I
this.
don't think those are tied together.
No, not there.
We do.
Well,
I pay for it and I do it, like, cause I don't leave my house, everything gets done.
yeah, but you don't put it in that bin.
No, goes in the yard.
Once all this material is delivered to this plant, does it ever return to town as a commodity for our
Yes,
They
taxpayers?
do want you to have a plan for what you're gonna do with it later.
Because they
and-
want to get rid of it and bring it back.
Sure, and she said to members of the community, residents who would like to get some back for their properties, their residences in Bethany. And I think we would have probably more compost than just people are saying, hi, I'd like some. And I think we could talk to farm and ask them if they would be interested in compost. We could.
Wait, you think
Hopefully
that-
people would say we want it, but you are expected to have a plan of what you're gonna do with it and the idea is back to the town.
So that, something.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Good.
You might be surprised on that.
So I used to work in West
Beautiful
Hartford.
gardens and.
they do it there.
In West Hartford, there was down at Town Yard, there was a facility called Green Cycle. And Green Cycle, for anybody in town, you could bring your yard waste. Like leaves and things like that, you had to bag up, but if you had brush, things like that, you could take it to this Green Cycle place. And I don't know if there was a fee, if it was part of your taxes, but you could just drop it off. They actually turned it into commodities, mulches, they had dyed mulches, they had wood chips. And then as a town resident, you can come there, it was pay a small fee, certainly not what like a retail establishment would charge, but you can get, yard materials at very discounted prices in your own town. Being a rural space out here, we do have a lot of space in certain places. That's like, I see that as an end goal, that we have that material coming back here. You have your compost, you have yard waste, whatever, that we could manage internally and, maybe make a little bit of money, provide a convenience for people in
Just
town.
cover the cost of them going up there to drop it off.
One of the grants that was successfully funded in the pilot program, actually there were 2 applicants that put in an application for a large field aerobic digester, and they got it. And they also got a truck to transport materials as well.
What was that, New Haven? No.
No, not New Haven, but New Haven got the largest grants.
Yeah, I know.
To introduce the citywide organics program.
So I,
Would that kind of, would a composting operation be considered a agriculture endeavor? If you are turning a, natural product back into an earthen product?
Sure. Absolutely.
Because, I don't know if there's any place in town, like a farm, or that would be
Said
willing.
that very definitively.
Great, sign us out.
But, I know there are people in town that want to maybe operate a farm for tax purposes, but don't have the means of. Establishing themselves as a farm or maintain themselves as a farm. And
Right.
Could be a little partnership for somebody who's willing to take on by using their space for our town's product.
So there are towns that actually do sort of set up these big aerobic compost sites.
But they can't use food scraps.
They can use food scraps, but they've just gotta be a lot more careful about it. I mean, they can't use
I'm
food
sorry,
scraps.
raccoons, bears.
Yeah, that, everything be out there.
coyotes.
So there are towns that do, I don't know if we have the personnel to manage something like that.
What was
That's a big deal.
land that we listened to? It was like 11 acres or something like
Yeah, I
that,
mean,
or
there's-
22
There's infrastructure that's
to
required.
compost.
Yeah.
You know, right now, because we are rural, most of us probably drag our lawn scraps out into the back and
That's
let
what
them
we do.
go.
Mhm.
And,
And our
so I
Lawn
I
scraps.
don't know if there.
My
was-
neighbor dumps them on my property. I had to build a fence.
Doesn't work.
Stop.
there.
I'm sorry.
Doesn't kill the weeds, we just.
I didn't say
transfer
with
the weeds
there.
all over the
Okay.
that's all.
So I think you could ask for more.
More than 100,000?
That's what I
think-
was thinking.
I think you should, because there are things you haven't anticipated that I read this earlier, and I think that if they're not taken care of upfront, then we will always be behind on it. One might be, well, the first thing is I think that everybody in town would want a container. Because nobody's going to say, you can have one, but I don't need one. Or very few people are gonna say that, I think, they're saying, and if everybody's getting a trash receptacle. Everybody else is getting. If everybody else is getting something for their food scraps, then I want something for my.
It's a
food scraps.
lot, and honestly, part of me was like, whoa, would they throw this grant out just by looking at that, by what we're asking for compost containers?
No,
Because the reason
we are small.
that, the ones. The point of this grant is a permanent plan, not a pilot
Not a
plan.
pipe,
Right.
right.
So you could get a little bucket for $1 or $2 that's plastic, but also maybe if you drop it, there's a hole in the side and that might reduce the, the capacity for people having interest. I don't know. Whereas if you have a metal one, I thought long-term, that would be a more
I
feasible
think so,
ongoing.
and I think you should
tool.
ask, I think you
for
should include that.
So. yeah,
When
that's
getting
good
one for the
stuff.
whole town, shouldn't we maybe get some data to see who's doing it before you
you
ask
don't
to
have a
give
lot
the
of time
whole
to do that.
entire?
No, I don't think so.
town
This
I
is
think
the
we have
problem.
more-
A metal,
We don't survey and we don't have the time, right?
You
We
don't.
have to get it in by the end of the month. And there is a process to do that as well.
Yeah.
And so we don't have the time to survey, unfortunately, but my.
that
question
really
is
pushes the
permanent?
budget way up.
That's
But-
okay,
Okay.
because there's a lot of grant money,
Right.
and you're applying for a grant, and they're not gonna say no to the whole thing. They're
You have to cover it,
unlikely to
but
do
yeah.
that. The other things I would, now that the question about transport has been answered, you should throw something in there, and transport isn't the only thing. Operating costs, your grant is only asking for the startup costs. And honestly, for it to move forward, we need to know about operating costs. And right now, looking at this, the second year, we're gonna be in the hole by $19,000 by your numbers.
For what?
Yeah. You're gonna
Yeah.
save $20,000, and what I saw was 39,000 of annual operating costs, and that didn't include transport, and it didn't include replacement bags and things
You
like
don't have
that.
to use bags at all. It was just to address people going ick. That's all, to get people
The
thinking
bags are
about.
the
I just
cheap
have a
part.
really
Yeah.
quick question.
But
Permanent. What does permanent mean?
It means that you are gonna continue having a program to separate out food scraps.
Yeah.
Out
What
of your
happens if
solid
you
waste.
don't? So that's my thing.
It's
So you get the
voluntary, so
grant,
not everyone in town would be doing that, we know it.
right? But I'm saying like, say you get this grant and this is some of the small print. This is what I mean.
And
So
you're
say you
doing-
get this grant and then 3 years from now, we decide to do something different as a town and we're not doing compost.
Then-
Do you have to refund that money? Like
I would
what, at
think
what
so.
point are you, what do they mean by
You said-
permanent?
The
We
grant is
tried
the
this, we found
infrastructure
it
to
was
set
costing
up.
us a lot of money. We
We're
can't,
doing-
we can't keep doing it.
Right,
But
I mean, I think that's what Jeff said.
approval
But sometimes there's a small print that says
Right,
it
is going to be
means
budgeted.
minimum of 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Or permanent means that you're offering this for what extended
To
period.
piggyback what Sharon was saying, that about asking for more. Your category one, which is 5 million, right? And those, it's by population you're getting ranked. So part of their thing is saying, how many small towns like Bethany are applying and how much money you're getting? So she, oh, it's only 100,000, I'll throw them in. So,
So I
but on
think
the other hand, you don't wanna shoot yourself in the foot either, but you are competing against towns of your same size, that's in their criteria. So just something to consider. I don't know if you know of any of the
I
other
was gonna
towns.
say, who are those towns?
I mean, it could be between $30,000 to $50,000 that we're throwing away in food scraps. We really don't have data to know that.
But that's, but you made a reasonable estimate based on their lowest estimate of what the food scrap percentage would be. You made 60%.
I don't wanna over announce how much people are gonna put in,
Yeah.
right?
On the other hand, you want to have the facility there, because if that $15,000 program, which education program is successful and people really buy in, then it's gonna cost more to operate.
Right.
And it's gonna cost more to operate in the following years, not,
But
because
the,
that's not what
the
not what the
grant
grant.
focus is in infrastructure to start up, so they didn't give a definitive
No.
timeline.
Right.
So I didn't really know if you should be focusing on a year, 5 years.
How much do you leverage for the grant? What are you saying that the town's gonna put in?
I didn't see the town was gonna put
You
anything
you
in.
should, okay, I'll tell you right.
Around
off the bat.
20% is
Okay.
normally what.
You'll
people-
get
Really?
whacked if you don't put in that. the town-
Well,
it could
you
be
have to go
considered
to a town
a
meeting.
contribution of in kind, just
So,
make it up.
I will say
In-kind
though, they
leverage.
might kick it back, so I've had that too, where they kick it back and they say, I didn't see your portion.
But.
So you don't have to, so when they start.
For annual budget, that's
Right.
over.
They'll say
So much
Right.
every town meeting.
But-
Oh, which
Yeah,
is-
special
there
town
can
meeting.
be-
That's how you get ranked.
Okay.
So you
The
gotta.
thing is that this can't be implemented without a town meeting anyway, because it is for hardscape infrastructure.
So would you
A lot
ask
of it.
we were asking to put in our budget for help for hauling costs for a year or for 5 years? What do you?
I'm not sure. But, the thing is that part of the process is getting that starting grant, and you should ask for as much as you can.
Do they call you and say, we think you're asking for way too much, we'd like to give you this much?
No.
No.
No, they just kick you out.
They
So
just, they'll just throw you out
here's
if
what I
you
would
ask for
do.
too much,
This
right?
is, this is honestly what I would do. If the language is startup, right,
Mhm.
which it sounds like it's startup,
It
it's
is.
not continuation, though they're asking you to have a permanent
Right.
process.
Then our.
What I would
contribution
say
would be maintenance
is,
Going forward.
I would say, right, your contribution going forward. I would say
Okay.
ask for the money.
Yeah.
Don't add a contribution. If they want a contribution, they're gonna kick it back and say something along the lines of like, you received your application, we're just wondering. Are you putting your 20% in? And then you have to make the adjustment. But what I would do.
20% is in year 2.
Well, you don't have to, right, but I mean, they sometimes go, hey, are you gonna be contributing or is this straight up?
Usually.
But the thing I would do is I would say, what educational components, because there is that, right? What educational components are going into, and is there a cost to that? Because that's part of the stuff.
10 grand or something like
Right,
that.
I would bump that up, because you're gonna have lots of meetings, you're gonna have materials, you might have, you may have different people coming in to talk about it, you gotta pay them. Like I would bump that up, right? And then depending on what you wanna do as far as bags and implementation, if you wanna have an introduction, that's a startup, right? So as part of the startup, it's like you do with anything else like cable. It's like, here's your freebie for the year, and then after that, I remember when we did the other deep grant, that was a big thing, because compost was part of it, is that they were gonna give out bags for a year. That they literally was
For a
like
year.
it was like a roll up,
That's what
good
we said.
times,
Yeah.
But here's my thing, when you do that, one of the questions they may have is how are you going to distribute the bags? And so is it that the bags are located at the device, which they might go MIA like they do for the dog poop bags over at vets? Or do we say they have to come to the town hall, to which now you gotta get buy-in for like the town clerks to hand out compost bags? Is it, we tried to get local vendors last time, like the gas station and stuff, to see if they would be on board to hand out bags? So there's other components that go along to that.
The other, directive of this is for towns to have more self-sufficiency in their own waste management process. And to me, I'd say the idea of our own truck, we're doing it, sounds more in line with self-sufficiency, in my opinion. I don't know what you
So
think.
then put in our truck and then training to train 3 drivers for a CDL license.
I mean, but we don't
I mean-
necessarily have to try to drive it out all
Or
the
you have
time.
some-
Well, I could for another job.
Every time,
If you
right?
pay for my CDL, I'll
For my
drive. I'll
CDL, I'll
drive.
drive the truck.
So obviously, I have buy-in for this. I'm very much for environment. I'm very much for this idea in town. I think it's a great thing.
Checked.
But I also wanna play devil's advocate, just based on one of the numbers I saw in here, it was $33,660 over the course of a year.
You will.
Which is
What we're paying, what we estimate that we're paying for.
Most performing.
individually.
Yeah.
So if you divide that 33,660 by 1,500 houses, it's $22.40. Is this program of gathering up my garbage and my scraps and separating it and hauling it to a certain place in town on a certain date, is it gonna be worth, to me as a homeowner, it's gonna be worth $22.40? I think a lot of people are gonna go, nah, I'll just throw it in the trash. I hate to say that without there being some sort of benefit to them at the end. I think not everybody thinks the same way that people in this room think about their community, their environment, but that 22, if someone were to do the math, go, well, as a household, you're saving me $22. Take your $22, throw it in the trash, I don't care. It's like, it's money lost from the couch cushions for some people, and I hate to say that, but it's a devil's advocate for it.
I get that, and.
It's the sale at the end, what they're gonna get for it, that you gotta highlight.
If you go through basically everything in our budget, with the exception of education, it's the same way.
Yeah.
No, that's only $5.
Yeah.
That's his only.
Doesn't that go with the education though of depending on the first year, obviously you're gonna have, and this again, goes back to the test pilot that we went to last time. The first year, we never expected to have a large number,
Yeah.
but your second and third year, if there's enough buy-in, right? If people like it, it's
Those
not
numbers
too
add up.
cumbersome, it's not too whatever, all of those food scraps are coming out of your municipal. Which are being picked up and we're getting charged for
If they see
by
it,
the time,
right.
right? And so I think the onus, and this is what kind of goes back to departments handling it, because this is something I put in. Is what type of either surveys, data are you bringing back to show the town this actually works? And so it's great to say, like, people are using it. Okay, what's the data behind that? And right now, I know with our drop off, we've talked, we don't have the best way of collecting data. Of how is our municipal waste being discarded? And so that is a question I would throw back out to recycling of, I think it's a great idea. I think though, the way the town thinks, I think you're right.
It's old thinking.
And it's unfortunate, I do think that's unfortunate, but I think that going forward, if we have some kind of data to back it and say, listen, we dropped off, because you can log how much goes to compost. All of that compost that went in there is equating to X number of tons. And that tons would have cost us this much this year and next year and whatever. And it increases our recycling rate, which puts us closer to compliance, which is our whole thing that we had an issue last year, which we weren't close enough to the 30%
That
mark.
was the first
So-
thing that you
so-
told us.
So this is our other component, so it might not necessarily be money, it might be another way to get compliant.
Can I just also say that, it used to be that you couldn't get something with wheels, that state would fund anything with wheels. Or that somebody to drive it, and it was just, so you might want to check that out, that this ineligible,
you know, that
I
would
wouldn't
be-
put that in there.
That would probably be worth a phone call.
I think that's
Yeah.
worth it.
To
Is that a list for the deep stuff? Did they say last night, let's move a list of
These
deep.
96 gallon containers, how do you get, do they lift up onto a truck, is there a ramp?
Those big cars, yeah, no, they've got arms.
It's the size of your trash.
This project is gonna help us get to that 30%.
So one of the things that we do know though is currently we are paying $85 a ton for trash.
I would
In
go.
Northwest Connecticut,
Because
started
it's gonna go
July,
higher.
it's 70.
Right, I would.
Kind of lucky because
Wow, that's a good thing to know.
I think that's the education piece and letting them know.
you actually have to probably the lowest.
That's what I wonder about that too, whether it's,
But it's not
why
the
that
same.
is happening.
And we know,
That makes sense.
we know that, the fast energy facilities are all,
Did they read it?
they're all 30, 40 years old. And they're not the state is not putting in money to keep them going. There are people who are trying to say, well, we really want this, but, right now, after the Beth Energy facility in Frankfurt closed, we're sending 40 to 60% out of state, so
In
to,
Ohio.
or further. So
And-
this is the trash crisis that we're trying to.
Yeah, I mean,
Sure.
okay, to follow up on that, right now, the facility that we are using in Bridgeport will be functioning for at least 4 more years. And we are in a locked contract for the costs not to escalate more than 5% per year. For the next, but that's off of the 85 this year, it's a 5%, not to exceed a 5% escalator, and that is based off of CPI data. So our budget that I had to submit to the state, our index for this year was 3.3. So it's very possible that that inflator for next fiscal year is going to come down will be under that 5%.
Oh.
And the minutes from the last meeting indicate that they have the infrastructure in place. That the facility in Bridgeport will be around for many years to come. I don't know their definition of the word many, but that is what is in print from the last meeting, because I received those minutes today in advance of a meeting that's next week.
So the issue that of course comes up is that, okay, you say that it's gonna be available for 4 years. It
What
may take
happens
us, it may take us 4 years to actually get to a point where people are doing this on a regular basis.
I don't disagree.
And, if you look at our recycling center, I mean, anytime we make a change, it takes years before you actually see it in the data. And so, people are slow to respond. And there are some people who say, I don't care, I'm just doing it the way that I always did it. We're not gonna fix that.
Can I offer some ideas that came to my head throughout this conversation?
Sure.
First, the evaluation and monitoring for $5,000, that seems low for me. If I were creating this proposal, I would do a 5-year cash plan. But if it's only focusing on first year, then maybe that sounds right, you know what I mean, like, I would look, if we're only, but maybe that's appropriate based on the scope of the grant, I'm not sure. And then, to your point, I mean, can we, what are these bins? There's an app or something. Can we put an incentive in here that like most frequent users or something like that will receive something? Why not? Why can't we, I mean, we're given creative freedom right now. Why don't we make a financial incentive for top users, and the incentive can be whatever. the
10 tons of compost.
And I go back to the
Or bad.
educational.
They get their bags for free for the year or something.
Okay, Eric, you and I had talked before with the educational piece, if you start bumping this up, like, people like video, right? So like, we don't have a video of the recycling center right now. Show how easy it is to recycle, show how you can recycle. Some people, I will tell you, come in here, they're intimidated to go up to the recycling center. And they throw their stuff in the trash can because they don't wanna go up there and look stupid. So maybe do a video of like how to recycle, same thing, how we're composting. How does that affect the environment? I know like it doesn't sound like something that somebody wants to watch, but I think the more education we get out there, the more we push it. We'll put something on our website. We have a recycling section on our website. We'll keep it up to date. We'll add new things. We can push that out on Facebook. Like, there's ways to do it that we haven't been currently doing it. And that's not even, we have more options, hopefully down the road. But right now, this is what we have currently. All of that, though, you might have a person set this up for you. So now you're paying somebody to set up like a promotional, recycling initiative. That costs a lot of money. So don't feel like $10,000 too much. You need more. And I would put in there that you're looking to set up promotional, educational materials to make sure that your composting is effective, efficient, and successful. And
starting in
Education program for the grammar school and
Yeah.
children.
That's what I was gonna say. This is a great idea.
Start there,
Biggest way.
get them, obviously get them recycling and stuff early. As a parent of two, kid guilt will get you to do things.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Daddy, don't put that in the trash.
They were very quick to say not to include this schools in this program because they're
There's
doing
another
their own
initiative.
posting separate.
Also, don't make a round numbered grant, like 100, because then it seems ballpark, like
Yeah.
you're guessing.
Hundred
Make
eighteen
it
thousand
a
two hundred.
weird.
I just submitted one for 423.
And she put in 603.
Yeah.
So yeah.
A weird number and do definitely have a match,
Yeah.
and it's an in-kind match, it's what the town's working towards at the recycling center, doing whatever it is.
Like the maintenance or the management.
Yeah.
Yeah, what we were already doing, but now we're gonna contribute.
We want to
I
do.
mean, if we know there's a cost, put that cost in it. So just saying, not saying we're doing this. But just saying, if we ended up deciding to use the recycling attendants, their salary equates to $3,000 a year. We will put in $3,000 that, you know, you can add that in there. So it's not an additional cost necessarily for us,
Mhm.
but it's a cost that we incur anyway.
Contribution.
Yes.
And there's one other thing that I put was for admin costs. So can you like charge the grant, the cost to administer the grant?
Some
So-
can and some you can't. And you have to read the grant on that. I doubt with the numbers on this one, but that's included.
And besides, it's an initial, only an initial, it's
Right.
not a,
Right.
it doesn't involve multiple.
And then
years.
I put also socials was another one, but that could be under the education piece, like.
Social
If you
media.
go to, yeah, like if you go to like a third party that's going to do, you know, like maybe a small PR piece, you might wanna include a social.
Sometimes, how I learned to write grants is by stealing what other people had done. Frankly, learning the language, learning, you know, something was very similar in format, that looked pretty, that had better words than I was using.
Yep.
And, I worked, you know.
And I'm so glad that you wanna be on this committee because you were instrumental. No, seriously, when I first started writing them. This was a huge help, especially with me trying to clean up the airport grant
Yeah,
there.
because it's the one, what I
Make it an
do,
emergency.
the one thing I remember very vividly from Liz's prior comments on grants is you gotta make the title flashy. You gotta grab their attention with the title of your grant.
And ask a question a lot of the times.
You gotta, because if the title isn't exciting, they're not gonna read the rest of it.
Survival of Bethany.
So I think, you know, to your point was, I will send it over to Pam Roach and, who knows, Pam, yeah. Because she actually volunteered to help us with this, and so I will send it over to her, let her make some revisions and then get it back to you.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
They
So
have
just
asked
give her,
for-
give her a net deadline though, and not knocking her at all, she's wonderful, but it's due on the 27th, so just so
They
you
had
know,
asked for community support.
this is the thing,
They wanted to know that their interest,
yeah.
not proof, but they wanted to know something for interest. So we have the survey.
Yeah.
And they wanted to know how much, if you had the data, if you knew, what do you think you would potentially be able to have your carbon dioxide and methane emissions? So I addressed that. There's actually a calculator for that. So we do have data based on what we tip and the percentage of that that is expected to be food scrap waste. So we have the requirements of the data that they said that
That they
they were
want, yeah.
looking for.
Yeah.
And the budget, that's great that there's a grant committee who's around to talk about
Yeah.
these things.
But, yeah, my comments about operating expenses after year one are not related to the grant, the feasibility of getting the grant. It's honestly the feasibility of getting it past
No, it's
the,
approved, yeah.
you have to get
Sounds
through finance and the selectmen and the town meeting that thinks our taxes are too high.
But I'm missing where the operating expenses are,
Okay.
because we,
Savings of 20,
why? Yeah.
savings of 20.
No more. We don't have data.
Well, no, but that's, you were, but
Yeah.
the, 25,000 for Southington. For whatever they're gonna do,
Well, that's just, that's. the
No.
transfer.
okay,
But we don't know what that, I mean, if we have our own guys do it, we could do.
I'm
that.
saying this is what's here.
Okay.
25,000 for whatever there, 5,000 to monitor, and 9,000 for something else.
We bought those are ours. So we don't, that's not operating costs.
What are
They
they?
can't.
Up top,
No,
Oh.
the bags are the 9,000.
No, the 9,000 is the,
One year
is,
back.
is the
One year back.
containers.
Those
And,
are
that's why
the bear proof units that the food scraps go
Yeah.
into.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but how long are they gonna last?
They're steel.
And what do they? Okay, and,
They're
Here's the
considered to be permanent,
all right,
as long as you'd like to have them. It doesn't mean you're gonna use them
Okay.
forever, but the container is permanent worthy.
okay,
I think the only ongoing cost would be transportation and monitoring.
okay, so that's 30. So that's,
Well, if that, I mean, a transportation number.
yeah,
is
there was
unknown.
something, you've also got, you've got admin costs and I'm just trying to think of everything that you've mentioned that
What are? the
it was
admin
not
costs?
required to be, it wasn't required to be in the grant application. That isn't it. Is this going to be a feasible ongoing project?
The
for the town?
monitoring, the evaluation and monitoring.
Yeah, oh, yes, and replacement, and if there were more people, if you gave everybody a container and a bag, that might be, I mean, would the town be doing that with the original pilot thing, they wanted, they would give us free bags for a while, and then we had to find a way to sell them to people.
right, right.
We had to find a way to sell them to people who work all day, who can't come to the town hall to get them. You know, and you'd have the same kind of distribution.
Add it in.
I'm
Add it
just.
in, right, because you can have them, and then you know what, you can
Yes.
make it part of your educational, where you show up at a meeting and you get a 3 months worth of bags. Or like do whatever, like I'm serious, everybody loves
Oh,
people ways.
absolutely.
So it's like, show up and you get the bags.
It's not-
You know, come to one meeting and guess what, you earned yourself 3 months of bags, like,
Yeah.
I mean, whatever you do to get them there, so you can educate them on how to use them,
Yeah.
put them in your analysis so that you can get
Is
the money.
Is the bag something you can make available at the recycling center when the recycling center is open?
You know, you can buy them on Amazon for 15 cents a piece. And so you buy, you know, a box of them for $10.
So
That's easier.
maybe.
The
the
bags
town
aren't
would-
necessary.
But
No,
Bags
but
aren't necessary.
distribution
compost don't use
is,
bags.
because people.
For the startup, yeah.
Give 'em a little bucket.
Oh, after that,
Well,
people have to
compost
buy their own bags.
But I do, I mean, I do think you should account for a bucket for every household.
Okay.
I really do believe that. And it's not necessarily that you have to distribute them all immediately.
You can, well, somehow.
Right,
just-
But you wanna make sure that there is one available for every household in the town.
You could do a pickup. You could have, you could have an event. You could do a couple of events and have them put them up here outside the town hall these days and on Saturday. Come and pick up your compost bucket.
Because
You know?
the object is to make it as easy as possible for all of the residents.
Right. And
And it's
I
not
think
like we're a
as much as
town
you
of
can front load-
20,000.
Yeah, as much as you can front load and have on stock, on hand or whatever, you know, that would be in the initial grant, that would help reduce costs.
Is there a expectation, albeit voluntary, that if everyone in town has the composting bucket in their kitchen, that we will have stellar, sky high composting tonnage? And if we don't, then we're like, oh boy, maybe we shouldn't have asked for a bucket for everyone in the town if no one's using it, right?
But we don't know.
Right, I think
We don't know.
But I also think at the end of the day, if
It's
like
better to
talking
give
with
them-
what Eric was saying about just the future and the whatnot, like if it doesn't right away, like 10 years from now, we need to be doing this.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, if it doesn't
So
happen
maybe-
now, like, if we do not figure out a way to educate the community, make it accessible for all and provide ease to it, it is a crisis. So that means then we put our heads back together and figure out another way to keep it
Well,
going, to keep it moving.
We want to make sure.
It's not like if it doesn't, okay, we're good and everything's gonna be fine.
And it's an expense
Not gonna
that
lie.
we can control because it's something we have control over. It's
The thing is-
something impactful.
You're also
It
doing a
might be.
townwide initiative. You need to make it available to everyone, whether or not they use it.
Yes.
You still need to make it available. So if it's a townwide initiative, it needs to be townwide.
And we're trying to create a behavior, right? Like,
Yeah.
Correct.
Correct.
And it might be that if it's successful for the first couple of years, then it may create its, actually, that combined with the recycling center and selling recyclables, if you can get that going, which seems likely to happen. That may help to offset the some of the annual operating costs. I mean, it's not like, oh my God, it's all gonna be, 19,000. It's more like you need to think about how the rest of the recycling program can help contribute to this.
The idea is to try and get our total waste cost down.
It's-
Yeah.
I mean, the communities that have these right now.
Yeah.
And how they're operating, and can they be cited or find their statistics?
Yeah,
So
so.
are any of them
what-
small scale similar to our
They have to be,
communities?
just they have.
In the pilot, West Hartford did this,
Oh, West
and they got
And they got what?
four bids
Four.
Really?
for their town.
I wanna
There.
say Easton, but I don't know why. That they had some innovative.
Woodbury,
Maybe it was Woodbury, was it what?
They did something different.
Yeah.
But to do this particular thing.
Yeah.
I'm
Can we
not
copy
sure.
somebody?
Yeah, I think West Hartford is the one that.
We go back to this company and ask them who their clients are.
Like even outside of Connecticut, like Vermont, New Hampshire, that are, places north of here are a little more green minded. I'm sure there's small scale rural communities up there that are doing stuff like this just because they know it's the right thing to
They're
do.
really green.
Yeah.
I think access to the compost is a benefit that,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I
There, I mean, it's kind of like the salt and sand. I mean, I go grab it when I need it. It's there. You almost don't think about it till you need it, but like, hey, there's compost. I think you actually run out of compost if you had it brought back to town here.
If we had it brought back to
Yeah,
town.
for
I think
sure.
that'd be-
I don't think Mr. Vera would be very happy about it, but
No, but maybe the long-term plan is that compost that comes back goes into a community garden that we're actually now feeding our kids at school, or that we're feeding the senior lunch, or that we're doing something like that. Like
And
common ground. high
Tie
school.
back to what he was saying about agriculture.
So,
And that we're unique. We're
guess
different.
part of what, we've given you a lot of stuff about maybe more that.
Sorry. Right, she's like, so.
A lot of stuff, but,
You can do this, you can do that.
It's
Yeah.
kind of like you don't. raise unless you
hopefully
ask for it.
it's
You don't get money unless you
constructive.
ask for it.
It's constructive for both purposes. How much you can get done, for example, by next week is probably less important than by the selectmen. Selectmen are gonna have to have a special meeting to get this thing done.
But, well, here's my question though, do they need to approve the application? Because in the past, they have not approved the application, they've approved it once we get a grant. Like, we can't sign the contract until the town or the selectmen agree to the grant, so they could potentially, if we apply to it June 27th.
But who's
If we
gonna
get
sign?
approved,
Who's gonna sign for the town?
Well, it depends on how the
well,
grant
when you
is,
submit it, I don't have Paula's signature when I apply.
sometimes we
It's
don't.
once
when
the
they come
award
back.
comes through, then you have to
Okay.
get signatures, most of the time, Steve and other ones like that. Correct, I know, I understand, but I'm saying in the past, currently right now, because we don't have
Things are tricky right
a
now.
selectman. We're not gonna have a selectman right now, right? So
Well,
are we gonna miss out on a grant because we don't have one? Or are we gonna move this one like we have been in the past, where we can apply and then, move on?
So
Steve
one of the
said it
questions
was
that actually
important.
is, who is this grant coming from? Is it coming from the town or is it coming from the committee?
It has to come from the
That's
town.
what I
Yeah,
thought. I
because it has
just
to
wanted to
come
make
through the
sure.
Yes,
We
which
can
actually
review and
was
decide.
one other thing is, I think, I'm not sure, but Jen can probably tell you. It looks as if you have to change
Okay, got it.
the
They said to
applicant.
put who was writing it.
Does
who the
applicant
contact
town
was.
Bethany?
They said to put that the Board of Selectmen
Uh-huh,
that they are familiar with
yeah,
was in support of this.
Right,
That's
then
what they
you have
told
to have a
us.
meeting.
Then,
before
yeah,
you submit it.
yeah.
Well, Eric and I talked to the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah,
They
keep
were,
us sign.
I know, but so.
not that one, the
Oh.
one before that.
That was it's.
No, but my guess is do they want an award, like a notary letter from the Board of Selectmen
Just
saying
a
that on a
statement.
meeting?
Just a statement that they were in support, so I
Okay,
think
is
even
there the
an
minutes?
email is fine.
So that's what I'm saying, so normally what
Yeah.
we do is if they ask for something like that, it's either in the minutes, if it's not official.
Okay,
So if that was already had and it's in the minutes, then we can do that. If they're
Great.
just asking for support, I mean, you could just reach out and say on letterhead, could you please submit a letter of support?
Support that the Board of Selectmen are on board, yes,
Correct.
but also that there are people in town that are interested, and we did have
You had the survey.
supplying data that said that there was interest.
Right, so you have that. So as long as you have one of those things.
They
you
wanted
should be
both of
fine.
those things, which
Right.
we have.
Yeah, you should be fine. Right.
I think you're good, but I think you should try to expand it to cover everybody in town.
And if it's something that requires a signature after Friday, I'll take a look. But if it's something that requires a signature, then they would have to have a special meeting in order to sign it, because they can't. Or they actually, they could come in individually and sign it, but I don't have clarification yet from town council. Whether or not we need a signature on things from a Board of Selectmen member, or do we need a signature from both of the remaining members? So if it's just the one and we can get a hold of one and they can sign it, great, you know, but I'm pretty sure it's gonna be both, because.
Maybe the minutes is. sufficient.
But your actual document that gets submitted,
Mhm.
unless it's portal based, that you're just
Well,
dumping
I
it.
have until the 13th to ask questions. That's the window period, that question, so I can still ask these things.
Right, but just keep in mind though, she's on vacation and then I'm on vacation the week after. So that's why I'm trying to be like, if you need
It's okay.
something.
Eric
like-
and I are.
So you're here tomorrow.
That's why
I'm here
trying
to,
like-
I'm here to Tuesday of next week, then I'm out for a week.
You're running away.
I'm going to California for my daughter's graduation.
That's
Congratulations.
Best time ever, love California.
The minutes from May, from the May Board of Selectmen meeting state that Eric and Cynthia discussed a potential grant opportunity through DEEP to support innovative solid waste diversion efforts. There was general support for the committee to further explore the idea and prepare a grant application focused on food waste
Yeah, you're done.
composting.
That's fine.
So
That was May second.
Good.
that was the
We talked about it, the town said, yeah, go ahead.
May 6th
May
meeting.
6th. Okay,
Yeah.
so what we'll do is we'll pull up the May 6th meeting and just get you a copy of those minutes to include in, and we'll highlight and you can include that into your packet as well.
That's what it's called, the innovative.
That's the way the clerk of the evening phrased it.
That actually is the way that the grant is. Composting is truly innovative. Thousands of years.
Yes.
Right, you have, and then anaerobic. You can scrap bones and things like that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
And they harvest gases off of it, they
Yeah,
capture it
yeah.
right there.
That's really. I think it's an awesome thing to be able to do. You know,
But we do have to worry about what Steve said.
But you know, and as soon as the words came out of my mouth, I realized that there's a way to spin that. And you could, I would actually come up front and say that, and say, you may not think that this number is significant now, but you cobble that together over 3 years, that's $100,000 you will save. The town in kind will save 100,000. So you just take that number, put it out there and go, but this is what the long-term goal is, and that's the.
At the
I'm fine
current rate.
Yeah, at current rate, it's gonna be even more than that as the rates go up, and I would mention the towns, you know, outside of us that don't enjoy this nice low rate. And that this is gonna be multi-6 figures, 7-figure savings over the course of someone's existence here in town. So yeah, it might seem like a small number and insignificant to you as an individual, but as a town community, this is gonna help us all, and that's just how you spin it.
Right.
So I think
Absolutely.
the education piece is gonna be
Yeah.
vital, and I think it also,
That's what we
that
don't do.
we don't do, I think that if we can come out with that with this, it helps
And I-
start to set the precedence of things moving forward.
And I think
Of how to
that's gonna be
educate
the way
the community
that
about the
we
issues at
budgeted
hand.
for.
You need, and just from feedback and everything, even with the garbage, right? From when I did the recycling piece, I don't know how many conversations I had with people, I put it out there, I tried to talk to people. And there were still people like 6, 8 months later that were like, wait a minute, we have we have like, you have to go to recycling, we're not getting single stream. And I'm like, whoa, like where have you been, you know? And so
Just the rabbit ears.
right, so I mean, so consistent, and that's where the money is gonna come in, right? Because you need some kind of marketing that's gonna be like, okay, and you don't want the same thing, because they're gonna be like, yeah, I saw that. You know, so you've got to kind of like, okay, we're gonna roll out this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then we're gonna have an event. And then we're gonna have this, and we're gonna have, you know, whatever, and so you've got to kind of be in your face for a little while before it shows up. So when it shows up, people are kind of like, oh, maybe I'll try it, like, instead, what we do is we normally drop it off, and they go, cool, goes in the basement. And then we maybe have a flyer that has a QR code that no one's scanning, and that's it. And then we wonder why we don't have the numbers, because you didn't engage the community. And so I think if we can engage them somehow prior to the rollout, I think you're gonna have a lot better.
I have a previous neighbor who didn't know about the trash cans, and 3 months after they were delivered, texted and said, how come they don't pick up our trash anymore? I'm not joking.
And-
I'm not, and I was like, that's your trash can.
I see like an information booth or something at the
Harvest,
festival.
harvest, like,
And it's
everything.
like, you know, community involvement, this is what we're doing now, hey, this is what it's gonna look like. If you actually have one of these things, or have some kind of photo display. Or something physical, tangible, or, you know,
It's at the senior health fair.
And
It
also-
comes in September, October. There's a booth about it, so the seniors get
I
involved.
wonder if Metro Store would give us a container for show and
Oh,
tell.
I'm sure they will.
I'm sure they
I'm
would.
sure for the money they make, the marketing, they're willing to.
We
do it.
each get to ask for one, and then we only order 2,000.
We have 3 samples for now.
One for each household.
Oh, 3, they got stolen, I don't know.
Okay.
I think that people actually could always purchase their containers.
There you go.
And so,
That's what it sounded like.
That's good to know.
Individuals purchase their. container.
No, it sounds like Steve has already bought that.
Oh, okay.
So we're buying them
So
from
they
the-
want to, we have to buy them from the state?
More like they're gonna give them to us,
Cool.
right?
that's the idea. They give them to us, but they purchase them, so if we had to buy them from Metro Store, they'd probably be more expensive.
Mhm.
But they can, I was just looking at the website, they can be programmed with different features in order to open it, like.
Ask for
Yes.
four.
Wasn't RWA offering
Or did
either
that.
recycling bins or composting bins recently?
To buy.
Oh, I'm sorry, it was rain barrels.
I was gonna say, yeah, they had
It's rain
something where.
I did the rain barrels from QBHD. Or down at the,
RWA.
where they sold them half price.
Yeah.
I did my order online, and then I went and picked them up in New Haven, and dumped them back in my truck. And that was it. It was easy. It was so easy and simple, and that's how I got my rain collection barrels.
So we were actually looking at doing composters.
I got a composter through one of the programs, yeah.
He couldn't set the price this year because he didn't know what, they come from Canada, and he said, well, it might be here, it might be here. And, you know, you gotta buy it before April 2nd, not gonna, you know, so it was just a mess, so. We backed off.
3 rain barrels, put a little olive oil on top, it keeps the mosquitoes away.
Red chickens and stuff.
And peppermint, gets rid of the,
Everything gets rid of the ants,
Ants.
mint oil.
yep.
The chickens, the owl, that's.
So-
All right.
At the grant committee,
How are you
what are our
feeling?
next steps?
That's-
Yeah,
That's what we need about your grant that you presented.
That's what we need,
We need to.
that's what we need, that's, what is our path forward?
Yes,
Yeah.
And,
It's
I guess,
Who were you in
I'm-
competition with? And I-
was this conversation helpful for you?
Yeah, so what we'll do, so we'll do 2 things. We will take the piece of information that you provided and make some modifications. We'll also invite her and get her to say, you're way off base, or, you know, you're close, but we'll make these changes too.
Mhm.
So we've got, you know, both your suggestions and Pam's that we can put. together.
I think that my suggestions are less, other than asking for more, are less important. The part about coming up with an operating budget, you can go through that and figure out what you think is gonna happen with with those, all the different, hopefully, buyers for the recyclables, and how much that might help to fund this and so on. So that's, you can't do all of that in a couple of weeks, you know, and you already have the selectmen sign up. So,
As long as it's portal based. If it's an application that needs to be signed, my guess is that we're gonna have to get them in here to sign it.
yeah,
So I just need to figure, I'll look it up and see if
It's in
it's
the
something,
mail submission.
and you're good.
So the thing that we don't know is, you know, are they going to tell us in 6 months, in 3 months, in 2 years? You know,
whatever you're doing.
So,
Well, it's
We don't
closing in
want them
July.
delivering them in January. We don't wanna have to do that.
All right, we'll work on the next grant after we submit, right? Isn't that the
Right.
plan?
Well, Yes,
But
okay.
if we got this one, then we'd have data for the next one, right?
I meant across the town.
Oh,
That was
yeah,
specifically
yeah.
across-
And I was also wondering, although this is a municipal grant, I was wondering if it would be okay for businesses to put food scraps in it, or would that not be
You-
open for?
You have to ask because restaurants,
Or businesses.
Yeah, that gets.
landscape.
Right,
I was like,
so what do
yeah.
they do with their food scraps? It goes
What, through
in
the restaurant?
their garbage that they pay for,
They pay
right?
for their
If the
dumpster,
dumpster,
right?
Yeah,
that's the easiest option.
Yeah, but I think
but
that,
that's still part of the state's waste
It-
crisis,
yeah.
right?
but it, well,
So-
it's also, people probably don't
Yeah.
care about, what the diner does with their food
Well,
scraps, but.
With this sort of operation, if you had, you could certainly probably attract a greener type of restaurant. Something that was either vegan or offering different options like that. Somebody might be mindful about wanting to participate in that. And that could be a,
Or maybe down the road, we do like we do at television kind of thing, where we're like, hey, you gotta buy your dumpster, but we have a discount.
we have an incentive.
Because we have this company that's coming or whatever, we can get you a compost thing, but you need to dump it. You're in charge of dumping it, we can get you the container.
It would be interesting if there was a residential version versus a
Mm,
commercial
Right,
version.
it would
That's
be
all.
from-
We can give these to our townspeople, but if you're a business, you buy it, but it's cheaper than your dumpster.
Right.
So, and it buys into our program, so.
How about a restaurant could fill up one of those bins?
That's what I was saying,
Yeah.
yeah, a restaurant, there's a lot of
Oh,
food waste,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Maybe get one more, seriously, get four.
it's all about a formula that they're looking at the size of your
Okay.
population and how much interest there is. So,
Don't push it.
I mean, we thought asking for 3 would generally be within what most people had agreed in the survey, although this one I didn't make a figure for because it didn't seem important to me to demonstrate how far people would be able to drive in minutes to feel okay about bringing the scraps out. But generally, people are okay to do 10-minute drive to drop off scraps, but not 20.
So
So we thought
If you
3
can't
would,
get to every place in this town in 10 minutes,
You
then
don't have to
you,
get there.
then,
It's every
then you're
place
new.
To get to one of these,
right,
so.
Yeah.
if you think
thought-
It was Inman Station,
right,
Town Hall, and the recycle center.
right,
Almost everybody can get to one of those.
So, but
places.
here's
Within 10
one of the
minutes.
things, that's one of your educational marketing materials, is like, listen, there's 3 of them, it's all within 7 minutes.
Yeah.
We've mapped it out, there's no reason, less than 10 minutes, you can drop it off, and here's our locations, doesn't matter where you live in town. So
Unless
depending on where they get dumped.
southeast corner.
one of the things
maybe
that,
that would be added, the location.
Would be over there. That's the problem, is over east
Yeah,
of
there's no town
63,
property.
there's no monitored town property.
yeah,
And that's the problem, so.
the interesting, I don't know if you came with 3 based upon population or if it was like some projected buy-in, but if you wanna put geography in there. Mention, and we do this a lot in the fire department, when we're asking things. Geographically, this town is, yes, small populations. We're the size of New Haven, the city of New Haven. I think we're up by 0.1 square miles difference from the actual geographic size of the city of New Haven. So we have that largest, a very large area to cover. And that maybe just be like enough of a trivia nugget to put in
Right.
their brains about what kind of size community.
You're saying we're trying to make it less than 10 minutes for every resident, and we have 26 miles of road that we need to cover.
Yeah,
This is how we're planning on doing it.
70 miles.
All of it is about
but
just,
that's the education thing. like-
right, but no, but I mean, in her.
In the grant writing
Yeah.
language.
In the justification for the
Right.
number of bids.
Yeah.
That's what.
Or the number of
is
collections,
Why,
We're a
what?
population of this, but we are geographically this size,
Mm,
that's spread
right.
out, we need
Why
this
did,
number.
why did you choose 3?
Yeah.
And it's
But
not
the-
necessarily just on number of population or whatever, you're saying, like, we wanna make sure that it is effective and people are gonna use
And
it.
also, I mean, if you're paying someone to do the hauling for you, then you want 1 bin. If you're doing the hauling and not paying someone else to do it per bin, that changes things. And so you would, before asking for a 4th bin, I would wanna, I think, have a better firm grip
Yeah,
on,
okay.
do we wanna do our own hauling or?
I do
Are
think
we gonna
though,
pay
like that
somebody to
type of
do it?
verbiage and trying to understand and let them know with the size, the population
Right.
and that, I think that also speaks to the validity of how important this is to us as a grant. And that we're looking at all of these measures to make sure that it's successful and that we put in the time and the effort in the grant writing. I think that that also speaks to being able to get approved for it too, that you're noting every possibility. And how to make it successful for your town.
Like I was telling Cynthia, sometimes it's less, it sounds horrible, but it's less about the data. And it's more about how did the reader feel when they read it? Did they want to help you? Right? Like what is your purpose? What are you trying to do? And did they want to help you? You can have all the data you want, but if they're like, you know, they've got
That you put
over
together.
half the population composting already, why do we
Why
need
we
to do
need
this?
it, right?
Right?
The other half.
Special.
Well, right, but they may look at it from a data perspective
And be like,
and
"You're
say,
doing your
we already
part."
have 50% composting. This is not something that we want to do right now. We have a town not doing it at all, right? But instead you're saying like, no, there's a need here and this is.
I
why we
think
want
what
to
they're
do it."
really interested is getting preliminary data from a good spread of towns.
So
What's
they'll,
that?
they'll just mine the data that all the towns provide.
They
and
don't
figure
have
something
data.
out.
So what data
But
are?
what
you
came in
gonna
the
capture?
pilot?
What are you gonna
Right.
capture?
So how are you gonna make it
you're-
permanent if you don't have
yeah.
any data? on
This
the
is
pilot?
voluntary, so not everybody in town is contributing, but they want a way how much they can keep from going into landfills. They wanna, that's it. So,
Things that you can measure. Does our garbage go
Wait.
down? Does
Yes.
The trash that we send to Bridgeport, does that go down?
Okay,
How many people are actually using this?
Right.
so you'll measure that through the,
Yeah.
yeah,
yes,
to open it,
Mhm.
okay, yeah,
And how
it's actually
much?
Going to send.
okay, so it's really solid data. points.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
So,
think I would wanna know like frequency of drop off, like, if like,
But that
This-
should be on the monitoring app,
it
right?
definitely should, yeah.
It should be, well, it should be capturing that kind of information.
and if you have great participation and you're not interested in seeing who's dropping off. And when, you don't have to keep track of that if you don't want to, but I think in the beginning it would be great.
More
data to have
information,
from-
more
How
information.
many households are actually
Mhm.
doing it and how much? Right.
Per household, wait, just like in this particular unit over any competitor or is the same?
It's the one that the has
Okay,
purchased.
and you, but you can pat them on the back by saying, we decided that,
Really
you
good
know, yeah. Just stuff it with, we decided this was the best for our town, just that.
Okay.
It's a serious thing, like, the narrative is really what sells it, it's not necessarily the data, it's how it's all presented, right?
Yeah.
So,
Sorry.
I should write books now.
yeah, I
I'm getting really
think it
good at
is time to turn our attention to next steps, though.
Mhm.
Should-
Well, she's got someone who's gonna help with.
Well, we're not just talking this, we're talking overall,
Going back to.
overarching.
Back to our grant committee.
Over, really good, she'll help you.
This,
Okay.
because we haven't really done that.
But grant committee does help with the budget portion.
We will.
If we're formatted, if we're it's considered
I have pretty detailed notes too. I get what you think would be helpful.
Well, but if you already have the selectmen's approval, then it's less important. It's just if you want to have funds available outside of the grant to do these things, you're gonna have to have additional information, but you're still getting it, so it's not I don't think that's an issue. And I really think more than anything else, it would be helpful to have the revenue side from the recycling once that gets, because that's gonna happen maybe just before this, or, but,
We'll see about that.
yeah.
We're not there yet.
You're not there with this one either, so. But this one,
Closer with this one than we are with the,
yeah, you could be.
Okay.
So can I ask a question back to, looking at the current challenges that.
So we're going back.
We talked quite a bit about a grant that's in the very early stages.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of lists with a lot of grants that are going on. Is there a way that we can consolidate that onto one and sort of track where, so that we as a grant committee can review we can put it up on the board and look at, here are the status of all the grants and here are the stages that they're in, like.
So here, what I've started to do, right, as it's kind of grown, I didn't do it at the beginning, but what I've started to do is I have a spreadsheet of as the grants come in. When Sharon and I talked, we were kind of looking at, let's take what we have and clear it out. Because it's already in process and everything else, anything new coming on the committee can take on. And so I can start a whole, like, things come up. So I guess the first step is almost before that, is how are grants coming to us? To know that we're going to be talking about them. And so I think that it's really, right now, people kind of do their own thing. So what kind of process are we going to have in order for people to know if they're interested in something, even if they're going out for it themselves, they still need to bring it to the grant committee to keep the continuity and the stability of what we're doing. You know, you can continue to work with so-and-so, you know, if you have it, like, you know, you guys did a nice grant, come here, you can do kind of thing. We should know about it ahead of time. Because if it needs approval, if it's something that might need like state assistance from the town, that we need to send things in ahead of time, all of those things, the minute somebody starts working on a grant, somehow should come to the committee, so that way I can put it on a spreadsheet, so that way we can.
Yeah, so my
Yeah.
suggestion, about that would be to call it in the idea stage. So if something's in the idea stage, which is like someone's thinking about it, they're talking about it, we wanna talk about it.
They just saw it on a.
They just saw it,
Serve.
or someone called them up and be like, hey, you gotta submit a grant in a week. That is like the idea stage right there. And then, you know, that could be stage one or something like that.
Mhm.
And then we'll meet and we'll, you know, kind of just give it a general consensus thumbs up and move it on to the next stage.
Right.
As far as, you know, the going to the selectmen and asking for an actual formal grant community, is it? My understanding is the people in this room obviously are interested in what we do here. Is there anyone beyond this room that we would want on a committee? My mind goes to. You know, is there gonna be somebody representing from public safety, like the fire department or Department of Emergency Management?
Rich Kogel originally agreed to be on the committee.
And he just resigned as fire chief.
Yeah.
He's going down to deputy chief. Brent has become, and I asked Brent who was gonna be working on it, and he says he's not sure. And then he had a conversation with him, and he thinks that Rich is not gonna do it. So, but, you know,
Do we bring them in maybe on so my only thing is, so my feedback that
We
I've
don't want
gotten
this
for
to
at
be
least
too big.
in-house people,
Yeah.
right? A, if you have a lot of people, it becomes a really big conversation.
Yeah.
B, some things are not applicable to every department, right? And so maybe, you know, have people on board that we say, hey, there was this really great idea, and we'd like to bring you in on this one to get your feedback, because it seems to have something to do with public safety, or it seems to have something to do with DPW, or it seems to have something to do with whatever. And then we can bring those people in as needed. I don't know if they need to be at every.
right, and I was thinking like as a division of labor, just kind of having, you know, knowing where these grant ideas would go to and say, hey, can you work on this? Could you come up with what your needs are and come back to us? Like I said, I don't know if they each department or each, you know, commission needs to have a member on the committee. But,
But doesn't that go back to department
It's
responsibility?
It's assigned to them.
So,
Yes.
And
but
then
even before that, so like,
could look.
say, for example, perfect example, we needed body cams. It ended up being something I'm pretty sure ARPA paid for.
Yeah.
But it was body cams, and Dave knew it was coming, and he knew that it was gonna be a lot of money. And so he's like, how are we gonna pay for it? We happened to have ARPA. Had we not had ARPA, that's something that I feel like the department head, as somebody who's here, should be bringing it to either me or the committee or whomever, and
Yeah.
saying, listen, I got this need. And it's coming up, and we're in the next 6 months, I'm gonna need to buy body cams. And so then that automatically goes on my list, it comes here, and it's like, okay, we need to make this a priority, because now we know we have 6 months. And then we can bring them into whatever we need to do at that.
There has to be a top-down communication.
Right,
This
yeah.
committee exists, and here's what you gotta do, folks.
Right.
And this gotta go out to everybody. So I'm thinking like, sir, for instance, I know they got grants out the yin yang, they operate autonomously, because I was on CERT.
right.
So I have no idea where they're getting these days, nor the fire marshal, nor like you said. So particularly the fire department, that's a big gap.
One of my ideas was, and this is, I gotta see how it works, but one of my ideas was to create just like a Microsoft form. And then that way it's something that anybody can just send in, right? It's like, it asks the basic questions, you're looking for money, and then it just gets sent in, and it can either get sent to the entire committee, it can get sent to just me, it can get sent to the selectmen if that's what they choose. Whatever, but it trickles down that way, everybody gets this information, and then you can move on from there, and if it's something that we can help with, if it's, you know, but that way everybody can kind of, if they're interested in money, or if they have a need, here's how you do it, and then the information drives that.
Would that be on the webpage?
I
on the
have a work
website.
order, but so here's my only thing, and I would ask for advice, because again, we don't
problem
survey the
is-
community. Is where are they clicking to find the pieces, right? And I can't put everything on a quick link. And so like right now, there's a town-wide work order. If there's a pothole, if there's a whatever, please put in a work order. Does anybody at this table know that that exists?
I
Yes,
do now.
yes.
No, they don't.
Now.
Right, and so, but it's hidden under DPW, so if you go under Public Works, on the right-hand side, there's a work request button that you can click and just fill it in, and it goes directly to Dawn.
So in the
But there's
next.
Facebook.
And it goes directly to Dawn, and it has been in the bulletin, but we've kind of like ebbed and flowed depending on what's happening, that's a whole nother,
People just.
that's a whole nother topic.
They're
I can't go there right now.
Don't
It's past 9, I can't do
even.
it. But where does it live, and what would that suggestion be? And that's something, again, with the, like, I would think that would be a committee question of where would we want that to
But
live?
that's even, that speaks to an even greater issue
Because
as
there's
far as
an
there shouldn't be
external.
so many back doors on our website. If you wanna know what's going on with the Board of Selectmen, there's 6 different places to go to the Board of Selectmen's meeting and agenda, and that shouldn't be. There should be a page and a page and a page. Every department has a page. It's not like I'm trying to find information and I can click this one and go here, or I can click this one and go here,
Right.
or I can go here and go
You can
here.
go under First Selectmen, Board of Selectmen, you can go under
Committee,
agendas and
yeah,
minutes. you can
correct.
Go under, yes.
And there's not necessarily, the information doesn't always populate for all of those, and I ran into this
I
recently.
100% agree with you.
So I'm also thinking about accessibility for some of the residents in this town.
Right.
And that maybe aren't the most computer or tech savvy.
Right.
How are they supposed to get their needs and their services if there's I literally had this at yoga, there's a tree down, I don't know who to call,
So
how
that
do I
goes
do
back to
this?
push technology, and that
Yeah.
goes to something I've been asking for now for at least 2 years.
That's
Where I, you know, if we have push technology, every time there's a new agenda, automatically goes out. Every Friday, there should be like an updated weekly report that goes out. Every time we have minutes, you know, they go out. People choose to want to open it or not, that's up to them.
Mhm.
But, you know, you get an email or text depending on what you want, and you get that information. The bulletin is electronic, it goes out. All of that can happen. That's down the road. Right
In your
now,
free
though,
time.
if, right?
Right, right,
That's what-
Right
yeah.
now, what I would like to see is how would Eric know that the town is asking, if you have a need as a committee or commission, not the lay, you know, person that lives on, you know, Carrington Road.
Why
but
can't
like-
they have access?
Do we want them to have that? We're gonna get
Yes,
inundated.
We need, I don't care. I think there has to be public access. I
Yeah.
think the part of the whole point of why we're even creating this committee, part of it is for review and standardization, but the other thing is so that people can give us ideas that are outside.
So can I make a suggestion of a committee board internal and then an external?
Sure.
Because there might be different questions, right? They won't know to answer some of the things that
Mhm.
internally we might know. So if they're looking at like when we had ARPA, we had extra funds, right? We put in the bulletin and we said, hey, you know, if you have any suggestions, email, you know, Town of Bethany.
Mhm.
And there was a couple, you know, but I think that if it's something that's a regular and it's available, you know, then they could fill that out.
Well, we have
And
to
then we
figure
could have
out
2
what-
subsections of like
Yeah.
community interest and immediate need.
Mhm.
Well, right now, though, to town employees and town-related departments, like the fire department and police
Right.
department, whatever. There needs to be a communication of who we are and what we're doing, and a point of contact, whoever that might be.
Right.
So I don't know who that is.
Don't we have to establish this committee though?
So, right, I don't know how far we
Because-
can go with that,
because
but
we
I,
don't
but I
have this-
can,
yeah.
I can already start the form though. I mean,
Mhm.
that I can do, and
Okay.
and that doesn't necessarily need a committee, right? That could be something that I'm saying as an administration, it's
Mhm.
helpful for me to know X, Y, and Z. That would be internal though. That wouldn't necessarily include the community at this point. That would be the buy-in.
Yeah.
I don't see why I can't do that. But
Well-
you're right, we can't necessarily do a lot of these things
But
until
we
we become a
we
committee.
can address process.
Yeah, we can.
We can do that, and we can short term, ad hoc, at least help grant applicants get things to the point where they can go to the selectmen,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get it to the select.
you know, because that's really part of, you know,
Selectmen ought to say that
The
they
whole
should
point.
come here first, don't you
So,
think,
so the
generally?
selectmen want
Yes.
this to be able to be the one to give the blessing on the committee.
Of course.
Right, so,
Of
so
course.
we just can't say that we're a committee yet
Of
until
course.
until they say, okay.
I have a procedural question, I'm sort of just taking notes, so we talked about an idea stage and then, once someone approves it, I wasn't sure if it's this committee when it's a committee, or does the Board of Selectmen have to approve it before it can move into the application stage?
It depends on the grant.
So here's the thing though, they don't wanna see it normally until there's some sort of
Action.
tangible thing to look at, right? And so I think if you would still have to submit something. So maybe there's two stages. Maybe there's the idea stage that we say, this is something we can do, and here's a grant that we think might be applicable to it. Would you be amendable for us to apply for it?
Yeah.
And then the next stage would be to actually apply for it if they say
Oh, okay,
yes.
okay, I'm with you on that. So there's the idea stage, something stage, and then application stage.
A formal, a formal process, like an informal initial. I don't know, advisability, feasibility, whatever,
Feasibility.
that didn't require any data, just identifying a need and hopefully a source for funds. Because it's helpful to know that there are actually funds available.
Right.
Remember,
And
because
how
we
much
need to
the
get on
town's
that-
willing to throw
Both
at
of
it.
those things could happen.
Well, and that, depending upon how we set up these
And how much
processes,
the
I
town's
love
willing
that,
to
but
throw
that
at
could
it.
be like, that's a
So if we
standing
apply for
agenda item on the
something,
board of
how much
selectmen
are
meeting,
you
is
willing
what's the
to
grant
put
committee
out
have
those funds?
this month for us? What does the grant committee needs have been, and that's it, monthly.
And if they don't approve it, right? So like if the selectmen say that's fine, you can apply to it, but we're not giving you any money, so you're not gonna have any.
They're pretty much anything. Almost everything grant supported has required a town meeting. So things have to be in reasonably good condition. In order, genuinely ready to go, ready for prime time before there's a town meeting.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there have been a couple of things that we went to the town meeting and said, there is a grant, we'd like to apply for
That
it.
was Ronald Hill, that was the
Yeah.
trip grant.
No, I wasn't thinking of that one because that was a whole different question. But others, actually the Delora one, we had,
That was true too, because that money came in first, or the award came in
The award.
first before.
Yeah.
The one that went to was supposed to go to the fire department?
No, that was the 23.
that was the. board building.
Oh, yeah.
No, that was 23, yeah. 20, we're talking about 21 still.
Ah.
Yeah, we're way back.
I mean, but the fire department one, for the burn building, they got that money approved. Without much
Well,
public discussion.
that, because there was no review. And part of the thing, it did not go through any kind of review process. So, and that doesn't mean that it was a bad thing, but actually when it came to finance, there was nothing about annual operating costs, nothing. It was only the startup costs and the physical building, which were just, they were questions to ask because we were putting together a budget. But that wasn't, is this a good
But my
option?
question with that one too, is they got awarded the money, but did they ever actually
Yes,
implement it where they had a source? Or were they just awarded the funds, and then we were like, oh, wait, we need to approve this for them to move forward? I think that's where we landed. I don't think the real grunt work of putting that grant together yet was done.
Oh, yeah.
No, they did,
No, it was,
Grant
yeah,
did it.
they did.
And
We
they got-
submitted it through like a state agency.
They went through Rose's office.
Right, no, Rose's office is you submit something to them with a little packet or whatever, and then afterwards they say, yeah, this is great, and it went through the state,
It went-
and we agree, and we're gonna award you the money. And then they'll say, okay, but we're gonna award you the money through like DOT,
It was,
right? And then
it
you're
was,
gonna
it was
go,
federal HUD grant.
okay, so then you've gotta go through HUD, so my guess is you probably didn't ever filled out everything.
I don't think they
with HUD
went to that.
because
They never got.
They never
to
got
that.
that second
That's what
step.
I'm saying is though, now that's another year.
Yeah.
Because with HUD, but by the time the portal's set up and everything's set up, right now, you're not getting your money for another year on that one.
Yeah.
So this is what happens, right, is people fill out these things because there's money, and then all of a sudden the town goes, no, we don't wanna do that. So you,
have idea.
So that's why you want the feasibility and the buy-in
Right.
before the application, before you take the time.
because we were told by Rose, I could be wrong, but we were told by Rose that year, there was two applications, it was ours and the fire department. And they chose the fire department over ours because they liked that project better, and then there wasn't a buy-in, so we actually lost out on money that year. So that was a.
Which again is why town agency grants should be funneled through a
Right,
solitary bid.
exactly. So
Correct.
how do you-
That's
how do you-
right.
how do you
Kind of
communicate
stepping on each other's feet as we do
Right,
it.
and you're gonna do that, how do you
Which is what we're
communicate
doing right
those
now.
pieces to external
Okay.
forces?
Yeah.
right?
Okay, we need to wrap it
Okay.
up for tonight, which
Yeah,
means
okay.
figuring out what are next steps. Is there anything?
I did
Um,
want to say something, just real
yes.
quick, but,
Yeah.
I think grant writing can take a lot of time
Yes.
and it can be stressful. The stress
Yes.
is real. And, I think this is too much for one person to do. I do. I think you need a lot more help. And I wonder if it's possible to get a grant writer to be like helping to write grants. And what I wanted to say was, if you have one person writing a grant, the benefit of that is you might have one voice for the story that you're trying to tell. And it's not inconceivable that maybe you could pick one of these things if you're all writing and each take a part of it and then try to stitch it together to sew it together so it has some continuity and voice. But if you have all different people writing a different part of one grant, it might not carry as well. But that's one way to do it. You could also all review each other's, you've got a bunch of heads together, so that's great. You can have this team approach to give each other ideas, but even if every person was writing with how much robust grant activity this town has, like, and how much time it takes to write them, I think there needs to be someone whose job it is to do it.
So your job then is to create that salary in our budget to then propose at the next meeting. Look at this grant.
I think going for helpful, I mean, I guess if you're not asking, but if you're asking what's helpful for me, right? The administration's already like a pretty big bear. The writing of it, this sounds horrible, the writing of it is such a small part. It's the gathering of the data.
Right.
It's grabbing
Yeah.
the departments and it's getting, I literally get things I'm not knocking anybody, but sometimes I get things on napkins on my desk that says, make it happen. And then I'm like, okay, like, what are we looking for? Knuckles crack, we do the things. But it's like, that shouldn't be that way. And so honestly, I think if anything that this could bring out is how can we be more proactive to get people to submit things earlier? So when things come up, we have something. The worst part about the entire thing is scrambling to sit there and go, I don't really have something, but we don't want to waste this opportunity. So what do we do? And then we start going, well, I guess we could do da da da. And it's not really something the town necessarily is like, that's a priority, but it's something that we can do with the funds, with what grant just popped in. So if we could be more proactive, if somehow there's a way for the committee I don't even know. I guess
But that
it's
might
asking
even
for a
be,
bit.
once there is an official committee,
Right.
there actually then is an education piece that goes to each board
Right.
in their, or department or whatever to say about.
An organization.
Or even surveying.
Yeah, like,
Getting
we're
things
here, we've
in-
created, let us help you.
Again,
And
PR,
what if you have
and letting people know what to do.
all at the same time?
Oh,
Then
they
what do you do?
Yeah.
They do.
You
And
do.
some of them, and I know that looks like a lot, some of them are through grants, some of them are bigger grants to deal with. Like I said, the applying for them is not as difficult as it is the administration piece to it. And it's keeping up with the quarterly reports, it's keeping up with any kind of reimbursements, making sure the checks all match, making sure nobody bought something on Amazon and then bought something else on Amazon with the same invoice and then like all of those things, that's where the work is. And so getting people to get on board and somehow setting up an organized manner. And I feel bad, right? Because people come to my office and they say, hey, I saw this, it's by Sunday, because they're always random, it's Sundays, right? They're like, by Sunday, you have to submit it by 5 o'clock, I really want this. And I'm sitting here going, well, what do you got? And I guess I can work this weekend. And I try to put it through, but that's not feasible
It's not
for me.
sustainable.
As the person who has been doing this for quite some time now, and thank you for everything you've done. I know we had talked about what Bob Chatfield had said about EF Prospect doesn't have a grant writer
Right.
either. As the person who is doing the work now, what would be best, do you think, for our town moving forward? As far as are you still interested in doing this and shouldering a lot of this as long as you get the ancillary help and you have this streamlined process? Or do you think it would be, a feasible thing to look into having a shared grant person? I know there's issues from who are they an employee of? Are they under our workers' comp, the prospect workers' comp, health issues, things like that? It creates a little muddied environment. you know, from that standpoint, I think it probably would be better to have somebody in-house doing it that's focused on Bethany. You know, but from a find the money standpoint, is it easier to share somebody? And, you know, that's where, again, I'm lost in it. But as the person who's doing it, do you want to keep doing it?
So that's loaded.
It is,
But
but that's okay. You're amongst friends.
what I will say is
And-
this. I think at
And the
this
whole-
point, that's not gonna change.
Good.
Right now, right? That's not really an option, I don't think, at this moment. However, if we start getting better, more, diverse grants that are community-based that people want. I think that people would be more amendable to having somebody help out with those things, as long as the cost is covered with at least that much grants that would come in with something that they wanna do anyway.
Yeah.
So it's just a loaded question for that one, and I don't, let's put it this way. I will do whatever we need to do to get it done. It would be really helpful if department heads understood. Like what goes into it, are able to prepare their own documents and are able to submit them in a timely manner. If those things can happen and we have some sort of organization, it would be a lot better for a flow.
I'm gonna suggest that what we do is, we start next time, and we have to figure out when that might be, with, what we think would be our scope. I mean, where should we stop? Because we keep getting into the weeds. We're getting beyond what we should do, but figure out what we think we should be passing forward to the Board of Selectmen, in terms of tasks for the committee, for the administration, essentially. And I don't know, who's gonna identify grants, who's gonna write them, just identify roles. And then start talking about, I think, this standardization and early warning are
That's what it
really,
is.
really critical, but we have to figure out a way to try. We can recommend that it be implemented by doing ABC. And they could start doing that as soon as they appoint a committee, and maybe we could make recommendations about who should be, not specific individuals, but roles that people have that would be appropriate to be on the committee, who they should then try to find and identify.
Do we have enough, though, with just the challenges to ask the Board of Selectmen to make it a committee so that we can move forward with the things that we want to move forward with, instead of saying, do we need to wait until we're a committee?
Okay, so you probably are always gonna be on the committee.
No, right, but what I'm saying is like, moving forward, should we, based off of the conversation of there's a need, right? Should we put something together, like, that's why I put together the challenges sheet,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Can we present that to the board and say, listen, we met, we all agree, these are challenges, we need a committee,
Yes.
we wanna be able to start setting parameters. Can you give us the blessing to move forward as a committee?
There may never be another committee if we do that. I'm just being serious. It sounds like I'm not being, but
No, I get it,
No.
that's what I'm asking, like,
Yeah.
how deep do we have to get in the weeds? In order
What
for
do you
us to
mean
get
you
the
have
committee
another
passed to
committee
be a
then?
committee?
I
well,
actually don't understand this conversation.
I don't either. That's why I want to get clarity.
because we're an ad hoc committee. I think the selectmen definitely want to appoint their own committee. I got that impression last night.
Oh,
Do
okay.
they have people in mind?
Do
No,
they? Oh,
they
I
don't,
don't think
so,
so.
it's on a video, you can look it up. They said they don't want the Board of Finance to be in charge of
Of grants.
preparing this committee. And so right now, the Board of Finance is the one that set up this ad hoc committee, and so they want it to go back to the Board of Selectmen, so the Board of Selectmen can say, yes, we definitely want a grant committee, because it should come from the Board of Selectmen and not from the Board of Finance. And so that's where we're at. And so, that's why I'm asking, how far in the weeds do we need to get?
You need to have purpose,
So-
objectives, which I'm already hearing you've got that. You've already got some people, but you probably need others defined, and beyond that step, you probably want a chair, a secretary, like.
Who's
with-
giving this
with the-
forward? Like.
the roles
Right,
and
but that's what I'm
responsibilities.
saying.
Yeah,
So
that's
we
what, that's.
That's how you have a successful committee.
So we just need.
Like everybody has roles.
We need to
responsibilities,
say, yes, we agree
objectives.
that you have shown enough that you guys can be a formal committee and move forward. I think a lot of our conversation, we're trying to set practice before we're actually a formal committee. So that's why I'm
Correct.
wondering, how far into the weeds do we need to be in order to bring it to the Board of Selectmen to say, can we be a formal committee or not?
And you
gotta
need
do that if
scheduled
it's not Sharon?
meetings. We need to schedule a meeting.
Who's gotta bring that forward? It's not gonna be Sharon, the full board of finance. That's it.
We can send it after we decide what we're gonna do, which I think we need to discuss it.
Or one more meeting?
At
Yeah, I was gonna say,
another
so-
meeting, then we can just as a group say, this is what we're recommending. I'm happy to go. If there are meetings of the Board of Selectmen, then I'm happy to go and present that. If you decide that you want to identify people who might be appropriate to appoint, I'm sure they would want to know, had we, aside from those of us who are sitting here who might be willing to serve, had we done the job of actually recruiting these people? And so,
In the bulletin,
Yeah.
emailing, I mean, you guys have been
Talking at
trying to get
meetings.
people
Yeah, I know.
for months.
Oh, no, years. It's
Years.
been at least a year.
Literally years.
Yeah, no, that's been proven.
Yeah, since the first time somebody at a town meeting said, well, can't we use these grant funds for something else? Why do you get to decide what we use them for?
No, no.
Well, then
we
are we able to
That's-
request up for the next selectmen meeting that they form one and here are some people that are interested, but by their next meeting or whenever that is, then if they're not approving of those, then they need to come with people. Their recommendations,
Can I,
and then we need to
can I
go.
send them this video and say, this is our introductory video of all things grants, could you please approve this group?
I
Not
would
serious.
want to know if they have actually people, like, I
There
really
is
wanna
no
know.
people. No, there's
But,
no-
but I think it is a courtesy to the office of the selectmen,
Agreed.
that we say, hey,
Mhm.
who do you have?
Right.
And if there's nobody, then we move forward,
And what do you think
like,
that this committee should be doing?
yeah, exactly.
But that's why I think we can outline it and,
They might have
They might have people, I don't know,
Absolutely.
they might, I think it's good.
contributed meaningfully to the
Yeah.
committee too, I mean, like.
oh,
possible.
I'm sure that there are other people, we just haven't been able to
Right,
identify.
we haven't had them
and-
come forward or, right.
Okay, when are we gonna meet? When are we gonna meet again?
When are we gonna meet again? So-
Yes.
My whole thing too, though, is with this grant, like, I don't want this to get delayed. You've already got the approval of selectmen, that
It can go.
it doesn't,
will-
can go, we
doesn't
don't need
need
to
us
meet with us again,
anymore.
right? Do we think you're gonna go through Pat, like, everything else, and we're good?
Right, well, you're gonna send it over to Pam,
Yeah, that's what
and
it's
then Pam's gonna give you insight.
Yep.
And then if there's, like we would normally, I guess at this point, is if there's any other questions, let me know.
Okay.
And then either Leslie, and that's normally, it normally goes finance and I, and then if there's any additional selectmen need, I'll let you guys know.
So we will provide what would be a final draft to you guys
Correct.
sometime in the next week or two.
I'm gonna send you both some.
Well, just, I mean,
That'd be great.
just make sure that you review all the notes that you got from us tonight, the application process, like the formal application. In the event you need to go to DEEP with any questions for clarification.
Yeah, I'm hoping that Pam will be able to provide a lot of insight there.
Oh, she will.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because I mean,
Done this for people.
you have like 9 days on that window, so.
I mean,
They're
the
gonna
bones
come.
of it is there, we
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
needed
yeah,
to tweak
yeah,
the
it's not
budget,
bad.
I think a
That's
little
all.
bit, and
Yeah.
I think I can add some. Like heartstring need to it too.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and more money.
We're a community that is willing but not able at
Mm.
this point in time to do
Yeah.
this.
Okay, so
Okay.
calendaring,
Calendar.
Please. How much of a time?
Is today the first Wednesday of the month?
mhm.
Yeah.
I'm willing to meet next Wednesday, but it's my birthday.
Oh.
You need to see me next Wednesday. Let me-
No, not next Wednesday,
Oh.
the Wednesday, the 2nd of July. We have an
You have a meeting you're chairing.
I
next
think
Wednesday.
taking a birthday off is a sign of a healthy organization.
Oh, I don't work on my birthday, so But I'm happy to come
He
here.
just set that whole conversation up so everybody said happy birthday.
I'm turning 50.
People,
I'm not looking for accolades. I'm looking to go backwards.
you wanna do the
Okay,
week after?
So
That's
let's
EDC.
see, I have,
You see, it's
The EDC commission that Wednesday.
we're the second Wednesday.
I have the second Wednesday, the third Wednesday.
I mean,
And
the first Wednesday of the month is so far good for me.
I mean, it follows the
Good for everybody
selectmen's
else.
meeting,
Yeah.
it
which
follows,
gives us
well,
maybe some information.
Right. So just
is it better to meet right after the selectmen's meeting or before?
And Eric, I think I'm gonna add that our next Harvest Festival, that if you'd like to demo the
We don't need-
Yes.
That was Monday, June 30th.
the unit.
So add
yeah.
function.
Right.
So
education,
Monday, the 30th,
promotion.
Community
I was gonna
outreach.
say, if we can get in, if we can have another meeting before the
Before.
next selectment meeting,
Monday,
because if we
Tuesday.
need to set up
I can do
scope and
Monday the
everything
30th.
else.
You guys do the
Yep.
30th?
Well, it,
Are you gonna be here? Or is that in your way?
I will be
I'm back.
here.
I'm back,
You're
yeah, I
Maybe
leave
for the
Wednesday,
next
Thursday,
selectmen
Friday.
meeting, so.
That's why
I'm here.
I need to submit that
Well,
minutes by
they will both
21st.
be
The next
here.
day.
Be able to make it on the agenda, so that was just my thought.
Oh, Katie has a point.
Yes.
See, that's why you're on.
What about Wednesday, the 25th of
Can we,
June?
can we add it to the agenda anyway?
Like
What do they, no, but we could at any point ask them to put it on the agenda,
You can have it.
They just have to do
Time.
public notice.
Not be specific.
right? We don't have,
What's
we
the
could still
regular
meet on the
meeting?
30th. And then, but we could ask them to have it on the agenda for the first. We don't, we could.
That
do
we
that.
that we would like to make a presentation on the first.
We're gonna do a presentation tonight.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying that
I think
we
Leslie
can,
just said she's not gonna be here and you're making a presentation.
no, we can preface it that that we would like to make a presentation in regards to a grant committee at any other meeting, meetings, not necessarily July 1st. And I will,
Talking about it.
Don't worry, Jen will do it.
We need to,
No.
we need to,
we need time to put it together
we do
though.
need time to put it together, but I mean, I've.
We
worked
need to-
before,
Well, then,
so I-
Time to
then July 2nd, because then there's no rush for us to get on the next board of select meeting.
July.
But then you're gonna be waiting until August to potentially be a committee.
Are we gonna miss out on?
Which, like I
grant
said, there's such, so this is how I'm gonna say this.
Yes.
We are still,
It's a yes.
correct?
Yes.
So it still could be possibly advisory, and there's things that I do as an admin anyway, that if there's things that I can start setting up for best practices, I can start setting that up, and so if a committee is established, we can move forward.
So would you want it to be chair?
I'm on it, I wouldn't necessarily, I don't know who would chair it necessarily, I don't know if it's a good idea if I chair it.
No, I think you
I
need
think I
to,
need to not
you
be a
need to
chair.
not, yeah, yeah.
Right, that's what I mean, like, because I do the writing, the admin, all the
Correct,
things, I don't
you
feel like.
cannot.
And the same
You
thing with
cannot.
Leslie and.
Oh, great experience.
But maybe that makes.
Grant writing.
I heard Liz.
Turn her back on me.
Liz offered.
She just said it.
I tried to.
Liz offered.
That's what you get.
Liz got it. Liz offered.
Love you, Liz.
Your participation will work.
And
Right.
can we adjourn this meeting
Yes.
before we get on
Yes,
hysterical?
pick a date,
June 30th, Monday.
Monday, June 30th.
or whatever.
Oh, I thought we said July 2nd, or 3rd.
It's just, it's a special
Second.
time right now.
I can't do the
Between
third,
now
that's my
until
daughter's
then,
birthday.
Lord knows what's gonna happen.
That's fair.
Right, that's. what
That
I
is
think
fair.
And I think
June
we
30th
should,
is
even if
great.
we.
June
don't-
30th is great.
June 30th is great, let's do it.
Okay.
What time, 7? I think.
7 works.
I
7.
mean, I don't know, we tend to go late.
This committee's important though, and there's so many.
I hope not. If I just get a text from my wife going, where are you?
Check your locations.
I told her I was with you. I told her I was with you and her, and she says, you tell us past your curfew, send you home.
You gotta adjourn so I can shut this off.
Okay.
Please, no
Oh.
motion, that we're not a.
We're not- no, we're not really.
Maybe you don't need to follow Robert's Rules of Order.
Right, I just realized I called us to order, but.
That's good practice. Future chairwoman right there.
Then-